Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 526 I Want to Have Your Child. This is impossible. Xianhong wouldn't betray me and defect to the company. Hearing the warning on the phone, Chu Tong's face was full of disbelief. She knew Ma Xianhong's character best. Even if someone slandered her, if Ma Xianhong had any doubts, he would come back to her to verify first. He wouldn't just join the company like that. Something unexpected must have happened. She quickly walked to the window and looked down. Soon, she noticed something amiss. The company was heavily surrounded. Damn it, if her skilled subordinates were still alive, they could protect her and find a way to break through and escape, but she had just sent them all to Biao village. Now, there weren't many skilled people left in the company. Escaping from the company's encirclement by so many superhumans and modern weapons was harder than climbing to heaven. Even if she could quickly change her appearance and disguise herself as someone else, if Ma Xianhong had defected to the company wouldn't have been unprepared after obtaining this information. You seem to be in trouble. Would you consider making a deal now? I can take you, and even everyone in your company, away safely. The company will definitely not find out. George slowly stood up upon seeing this. He anticipated that Ma Xianhong would likely join the company after learning the truth, and the company, upon discovering Chu Tong's purpose, would inevitably take drastic action. He wasn't intentionally trying to trick Chu Tong. Ma Xianhong was his previous business partner, so there was nothing he could do. Hearing George's words, Chu Tong hesitated for a second before immediately making a decision. Alright, then please have Mr. Jin lead us away from here. I will present the double-handed technique manual once we are safe. No problem, call your men to assemble. George nodded. What was incredibly difficult for others was far too easy for him. Soon, Chu Tong gathered all the company's key personnel in the room and took all the important documents and materials with her, minimizing the losses. Ma Xianhong knew some things about her, but much of it was superficial. He was completely unaware of the crucial intelligence. This crucial intelligence absolutely could not be allowed to fall into the company's hands, otherwise her plans would be severely damaged. As long as she escaped in time, it would only be a minor injury. With a few more years, she could recover. Go! George's special magic circle enveloped everyone, and they all vanished from their spot. They reappeared in a forest. Thank you, Mr. Jin, otherwise I would have been captured and interrogated by the all-knowing gang by now. Chu Tong bowed to George in gratitude. George waved his hand. It's just a transaction. It's time to pay the reward. Chu Tong's eyes darted around, and she covered her mouth with a light laugh. Mr. Jin, I forgot to tell you before, the inheritance of the dual-handed technique is engraved in genes. Even if I record the technique for you, you won't be able to use it. However, if you're willing, I can have a child with you. The child will have my genes and can inherit the dual-handed technique. After saying that, she reached out and gently stroked George's chest. She wasn't lying to him. The dual-handed technique could only be inherited through genes, which was why her mother, Duan Mu Ying, was imprisoned by the Lu family and used as a breeding tool. All the children in the Lu family who awakened the Blue Hand did so because they possessed her mother's genes. Before creating the dual-hand technique, Duan Mu Ying had married Wang Zizhong, and soon after, she became pregnant with her daughter. When captured by the Lu family, to protect herself and her father, she was forced to bear children for the Lu family, dying in despair. Her nameless tombstone in the Lu family cemetery is her final resting place. Lu Si, the head of the Lu family, had always secretly loved her mother, and after her death, he sent her abroad to study as promised. However, Lu Si didn't expect that she had already awakened her blue and red hand techniques and uncovered the truth of what happened back then. Her purpose in returning to China and founding the Yaoxing Society was threefold. First, to avenge her mother against the Lu family, making them, one of the 10 elders, disappear from the world. Second, to prevent such tragedies from happening again, creating a world full of extraordinary individuals where no one would suffer the same persecution as her mother. And third, for herself, as she greatly admired Wu Jinshen, whom her mother spoke of, and she wanted immortality. If Jin Bao was willing to have a child with her, she would be unable to escape her control and become her most powerful henchman. However, George paid no attention to Chu Tong's words, simply reaching out and pressing down on her head with lightning speed. No need, I can get it from your brain. Normally, the dual-handed technique requires inheritance, which he knew, of course. But he wasn't in a normal situation, he had the inheritance of Master Jiang. As long as he obtained the operational root of the technique, he could naturally deduce the rest. What are you doing? Sensing George's mental power invading her brain and trying to read her memories, Chu Tong's expression changed, and she quickly activated a dual-handed technique for defense. She was always the one manipulating other people's souls and memories. This was the first time she had been so brutally invaded. Her brain contained too many secrets that she absolutely couldn't let Jin Bao see. What am I doing? Of course, I'm taking the reward for the transaction. George smiled, his mental power forcefully breaking through Chu Tong's mental defenses with absolute advantage, beginning to invade her brain and read her memories. Chu Tong's subordinates immediately launched an attack on George, but they had barely started when George's gaze swept over them. Terrain effect, gravity zone. The area around him immediately became a supergravity zone, and Chu Tong's subordinates were instantly pressed to the ground, unable to get up. She's got a story, but the effect of these dual-wielding hands is even better than I imagined. After reading Chu Tong's memories, George waved his hand to dispel the gravity effect. From Chu Tong's perspective, everything she did wasn't wrong, but she always used her cleverness to scheme against him, so she had to be taught a lesson. The world of supernatural beings is like the martial arts world in wuxia novels, full of love, hate, and bloodshed, with no absolute right or wrong. He didn't have time to be a judge. Obtaining the dual-wielding hands was enough for him. However, he learned many secrets of the supernatural world from Chu Tong's memories, which was an extra bonus. As for the true effect of the dual-wielding hands, it was even better than he had imagined. The blue hand of the dual-wielding hands corresponds to the soul. It can not only read and delete memories, but after reaching mastery, it can also infiltrate a person's subconscious, implanting various thoughts and turning them into its slaves. Chu Tong was able to establish the Yaoxing Society, a force independent of the 10 elders, in such a short time thanks to her mastered blue hand. Those supernatural beings nominally rescued by the Yaoxing Society ultimately became her loyal subordinates. The red hand, corresponding to the physical body, possesses limitless healing abilities. As long as there is a breath left, no matter the severity of the injury, it can be healed. No matter the disease, it can be cured. Even if her own flesh and blood were completely destroyed, she could rapidly heal and regrow them using the double-handed red hand. Chapter 527 The Battle of Two Cities in the New World. George himself possessed several decent healing spells, though none as exaggerated as the dual-handed technique. He felt that if he mastered the dual-handed technique, and combined it with his own healing spells, soul extraction and control spells, and necromancy, he could not only revive the dead but also save souls, as long as they weren't trapped or reincarnated. Even without a body, he could simply give the soul a new one or create a magical body to house it. Alright, deal done. Rat tail juice, please. With a dual-handed technique in hand, George was too lazy to argue with Chu Tong any further and instantly vanished. Chu Tong woke up, clutching her head, gritting her teeth, filled with anger yet helpless. She couldn't afford to offend someone like Jin Bao. This guy is definitely not a gentleman. Now she understood. Jin Bao had a bottom line. He wouldn't forcibly seize techniques, but he wasn't a truly righteous person either. She suspected that Ma Xianhong's defection to the company, leading to the company sending a large number of superhumans to capture her, might be related to Jin Bao. Otherwise, how could it be such a coincidence that Jin Bao arrived just as she faced a life-threatening crisis and needed his help? Check where we are. Chu Tong frowned, looking up at the sky. She had a bad feeling. One of her subordinates took out an instrument, operated it for a moment, scratched his head, and replied, "We seem to be on a small island near New York." Meanwhile, George reappeared at the Jiajia Village Martial Arts School in Xi'an, Shaanxi. With the strength of Chu Tong and her group of extraordinary individuals, a remote island wouldn't kill them, but returning home would likely take considerable time. A small lesson for Chu Tong. Still want to have his child? Dream on. He came to Jiajia Village naturally for the Jia family's unique manipulation techniques. Mastering these, combined with his ability to control a metal, would maximize his physical damage. Currently, he had acquired 6 of the 8 extraordinary techniques. Only the 6 treasures Immortal Thief and the Great Luo Cave Observation remained unobtained. The Great Luo Cave Observation was interesting. Not only could the tracking spell not find it, but even the divination was vague. Gu Jiding, the creator of the Great Luo Cave Observation, suddenly vanished into thin air when he was ganged up on by a group of sorcerers. He has never been seen since, and no one knows where he is. Hu Tu, the leader of the sorcerers who led the attack, went mad not long after. According to his combined memories, Gu Jiding's Great Luo Cave Observation was a Taoist technique that could create various key formations, much like how Master Jiang created the key formation of the 24 heavenly valleys. His disappearance might be due to his body transforming into a key formation existing between heaven and earth, indirectly merging with the world, which is why his divination made it difficult to pinpoint his exact location. As for why Hu Tu went mad, it's estimated that Gu Jiding altered his own key formation. He will acquire the Great Luo Cave Observation if he has the opportunity, otherwise, he can combine the techniques of this world and, through Master Jiang's legacy, comprehend a similar one himself. The last one, the 6 Treasuries Immortal Thief, was created by Ru and Feng, who is currently hiding on Nazan Island. The 6 Treasuries Immortal Thief is the ultimate cultivation technique for life, capable of creating a near-immortal body with extremely abnormal regenerative abilities. The 6 Treasures Immortal Thief, also known as the Sage Thief, uses 6 treasures to refer to the 6 internal organs of the human body that absorb energy. Based on this, a perfect digestive system is created, capable of instantly breaking down ingested substances and transforming absorbed nutrients into ki through circulation. Feng Baobao's longevity primarily originates from the 6 Treasures Immortal Thief, but it has undergone special changes by combining it with the other 8 extraordinary techniques, becoming even more perfect. He has no interest in longevity itself, as he has already achieved it. However, he is very interested in the 6 Treasures Immortal Thief's ability to seize the creation of heaven and earth, absorb the life force of heaven and earth for its own use, and continuously strengthen its physical body. This world has nothing of value. Devouring people, especially those of otherworldly nature, is already the best option, and it easily leads to psychological problems. He has so many clones in so many worlds. There are countless good things he can devour using the 6 Treasures Immortal Thief in the future. For example, if he could devour all the dragons from the northern continent of Demon Tail, his physical body would definitely be greatly enhanced. And if he could release the 10,000 dragons from the past through the Eclipse Gate as planned and devour them all, needless to say. There are also celestial embryos from Earth in the Marvel Universe, Ego, Star-Lord's biological father, and many more. However, to make a deal with Ru and Feng, he needs to master the dual hand technique first to help Ru and Feng resolve his psychological issues. Moreover, he gleaned many secrets from Chu Tong's memories, including the past of Nathan Island and the Trinity sect, some of which are quite interesting. Nathan Island isn't open yet, so he can use this time to collect other Taoist techniques and practice the 8 extraordinary skills he obtained. Once Nathan Island opens, he'll go and resolve everything at once. After spending an hour in Jia Family Village, George left satisfied with the Jia family's art of manipulating objects technique he'd acquired through the trade. Later, he used tracking magic and divination to find some members of the Guangxing sect, obtaining their cultivation techniques through soul searching, especially the lone technique he valued most. A month later, he arrived at the Lu family, met Lu Jin, and obtained the reverse life triple technique from Lu Jin. The terms of the trade were as he expected, to help Lu Jin find Li Muxuan, the root cause of the Trinity sect's destruction. He already knew the whole story of the Sanyi sect from Chu Tong, and he also knew that Li Muxuan was hiding on Nathan Island. That's why he wasn't in a hurry to go there before. Now that he'd accepted this deal, he could go to Nathan Island and get everything done. During the month or so that George was collecting various sect techniques and comprehending the 8 extraordinary skills, a new clone appeared in his body. In Zuan, the lower city of Piltover, in a filthy river, George, having received new memories, slowly opened his eyes. The murky river split in two, and his new body emerged from the water, landing on a wooden path beside it. Piltover. Zuan, is this the world of League of Legends? His new body was an 11-year-old boy named Sile, an orphan from Zuan. His parents died in the Battle of Piltover Bridge a few years ago, and he had lived by begging, eventually becoming a thief. He died in the polluted river after inhaling toxic chemical fumes. Based on Cell's memories, George quickly identified the anime Battle of Two Cities from his previous life, which led him to the related game League of Legends. This is a powerful world, and it's filled with magical forces. Looking at Piltover and Zaun alone in Battle of Two Cities, they didn't seem particularly powerful. But if you extend that to the wider world, it's a different story. Although he had only played League of Legends, he still had some understanding of the world it inhabited. Chapter 528 Jinx and V. According to his memories from his previous life, the universe of League of Legends seems to be a multiverse as well. It contains a creator god, a material world, a spiritual world, a negative void world, void creatures, Protoss, primordial demons, demigods, ascended beings, Darken, and Iceborn, among others. While it might not be as powerful as the Marvel Multiverse, it should surpass the worlds of his previous incarnations. Cleaned up. Restored to its original state, with a wave of his hand, he used magic to cleanse the stains from his body, completely refurbishing his tattered old clothes, and strode forward. I'll find a bookstore and buy some books to learn more about this world before making any plans. His understanding of this world is rather limited. He only knows that in the beginning of time, Aurelian Sol created countless planets, including Runeterra, the planet where League of Legends is located. Later, the first civilization, the Colossus, was born on Runeterra. The ambitious High Colossus stole Aurelian Sol's power and left Runeterra to colonize the entire universe. After the Colossus left, human civilization was born, followed by the Iceborn Empire established by the Ice Sisters, who fought against the Void Watchers. The birth of the Shurima civilization, the era of the Darken, the era of the Dark Empire, the Rune Wars, and so on. He wasn't very familiar with the specific details of these historical events. His clone, a child, was barely fed, let alone cultured, and knew even less. The child didn't know much about Zaun, the place where he lived, and had never even been to Piltover, the upper city. Just as he was thinking about which bookstore in the lower city might have the information he needed, a little girl with short blue hair, carrying a backpack, hurriedly ran towards him. Chasing after her was a rather fierce-looking boy. "Little girl, hand over your loot, or I'll make you regret it." This energy fluctuation, this scene, in the lower city of Zaun, such situations were common. The place was inherently chaotic. George hadn't originally intended to interfere. He still needed to find the information. However, the magical power emanating from the little girl's bag and the current scene made him stop in his tracks. If he remembered correctly, the little girl was Jinx, and the things in her bag were Hextouch crystals stolen from Jason the upper city. Hextouch, a combination of magic and technology. Interesting, George thought for a moment as Jinx ran past him. After the boy caught up, George tripped him, sending him flying. The boy crashed to the ground, but quickly got back up. He didn't chase after Jinx, who was now cornered by the sewage river, but turned and glared angrily at George. "Where did this brat come from, daring to ambush me? You've got a death wish." The boy looked at George, feeling a sense of familiarity, but couldn't quite place him. It was understandable that he didn't recognize him. Not only was his clothing different, the original Sile was disheveled and dressed in tattered clothes, while George was clean and dressed in brand new clothes, but his appearance and physique were also vastly different. Sile had suffered from chronic hunger and poisoning, leaving him emaciated and sallow, like a spotty bamboo pole. After George took over the body, due to the shared abilities, his body was instantly and dramatically strengthened, filled with immense energy. So his entire body was like a piece of exquisite jade, and his spirit and energy made him look extraordinary. This was also why the big boy, though furious, didn't immediately pounce on George and beat him up. The big boy suspected George was from the upper city. "Get lost," George replied with just one word. Upon hearing this, the big boy's veins bulged, and he no longer cared whether George was from the upper city or not, raising his fist and charging at George. However, before his fist could even reach George, George slapped him across the face, sending him flying and crashing into a nearby wooden wall, unconscious. After the Rune Wars, many countries were extremely afraid of magic, and Piltover, a progressive city, was no exception. He didn't want to attract attention yet, so he didn't plan to use magic in public. However, even without using magic, his physical body alone was not something that ordinary people in Piltover could withstand. It was estimated that no one here could withstand his slap. "Are you alright?" After knocking the big boy unconscious, George smiled and asked Jinx, who was peeking out from behind. Jinx, seeing that George meant no harm, cautiously stepped forward. "Thank you for saving me. It was nothing. Hello, my name is George." George stepped forward and extended his hand in a friendly manner. Jinx, no longer nervous, smiled and extended her hand. "My name is Boom, Boom, Boom." Just then, anxious shouts rang out, and a tomboy with short pink hair ran over with two henchmen, one fat and one thin. Piltover Enforcer V, seeing the pink-haired tomboy checking Jinx for injuries, George immediately guessed his identity. Jinx briefly explained her ordeal, and V turned around and looked George up and down. "You're from the upper city, right? I hate people from the upper city, but thank you for saving Boom anyway. If you need any help in the lower city, you can come find me at Fusion Tavern. I'm not from the upper city, I'm from Demacia, just here for tourism," George said, his eyes darting around. Saying he was from the upper city was pointless. Saying he was from the lower city was too much for anyone to believe. They decided to fabricate an outsider identity and find someone far away, since no one could travel that far to verify it. Piltover relies on trade, so it's normal for many outsiders to trade every day, whether in the upper or lower city. V's face immediately showed surprise. "Demacia, I heard Vander mention it. It's not close to here. Did you come alone?" George looked to be about 11 or 12 years old, about the same age as Boom. "Yes, I like traveling. Piltover and Zone are my first stops," George casually replied, then asked, "Do you know where there's a bookstore?" "Bookstores? There are very few of these in the lower city, more in the upper city, but there is one not far from the tavern. You come with us, we'll take you there." V thought for a moment and replied. The lower city is mostly filled with shops selling all kinds of contraband, especially alchemy workshops that concoct various potions, so the air quality is very poor. As for bookstores, there are very few. "This is troublesome," George nodded, and he and Wei found the nearest steam-powered elevator, arriving at the largest and most bustling alleyway in the lower city. This was the lower city's trading market. Chapter 529, Taking Piltover within a week. "I heard that the walls of Demacia are made of anti-magic stones. Is that true? Demacia's dragon riders are famous throughout the continent. Have you ever seen them?" Demacia. V's two henchmen had never been to Demacia, so they were quite curious about it and kept asking George all sorts of questions along the way. George gave vague answers, because he had never actually been to Demacia either. However, he didn't care. He was just making up an identity to make himself seem more believable, and even if he was exposed, it didn't matter. After all, his strength was there, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Although it's a bit chaotic, it's quite lively. Walking through the dark alley, George appeased his two henchmen while observing his surroundings. The entire alley was like a large canyon, with crooked buildings on both sides and horizontal staircases for passage. The customers moving through the alley were dressed in all sorts of strange clothes, and their races were also different. Of course, the majority were humans. The items for sale were diverse, and George even saw pets like stone beetles and porous that he often saw in games from his previous life. Everyone was armed, their eyes wary. "The bookstore is in that direction, about 300 meters away," V said to George, pointing to the road on the left in front of the Fusion Tavern. George nodded, then pointed to V's backpack. "I sense something with special energy in your bag. If you're interested in selling, I can buy it. I'm very interested in these strange things." The Hextech crystals Jace created mainly came from rune crystals he obtained from Victor in the future, containing considerable rune power. Runes are the essence of magic in this world and the foundation of creation elements. He wanted to use these Hextech crystals to study the magic of this world. "How much are you willing to pay?" V's eyes lit up. She and her friends had gone to the upper city to steal things, hoping to earn some pocket money. George pretended to reach into his pocket, then used polymorph to conjure a large piece of gold. "Is this enough?" Gold is a hard currency in most worlds, and the League of Legends world is no exception. "Enough. Enough. Enough." Seeing George pull out such a large piece of gold, V, her henchman, and Boo all nodded in unison. Such a large piece of gold, if converted to local currency, would last them a very long time. "George, be careful in the alley. Don't trust people too easily, and don't pull out such a large piece of gold all at once." V handed George a bag of Hextech crystals and took the heavy piece of gold, offering a friendly reminder before entering the tavern. George, an 11 or 12-year-old boy, carrying gold would easily attract attention. In the alley, with Vander's protection, things were a little better. Outside the alley and into Hilco's territory, he'd likely lose both his money and his life. Thanks, George smiled and headed towards the bookstore 300 meters away. Entering the bookstore, he tossed a few copper coins to the owner and quickly began browsing. With his current level of transfiguration, he could transform into gold, gems, and naturally, all sorts of coins. Even magical items, as long as they aren't too complex, he can conjure them. Moreover, he can already achieve permanent transformation, unlike normal transfiguration which reverts to its original form when magic power is depleted. Permanent transformation completely alters the structure of matter, essentially equivalent to directly creating objects. To create his own little world, besides mastering the ability to create life, the ability to create objects is indispensable. He's currently only in the initial stages. Only when he can create mountains and rivers will he barely reach the passing grade. Reaching that level will require a considerable amount of research. But that's alright, he already has plans in this area. Once he's stronger and more confident, his Middle-earth avatar can lead the elves to defeat Morgoth and seek out the gods to learn this kind of magic. Too little. It seems I still need to go to the bookstores in the upper city and the private libraries of those ancient noble families to find more information about this world. In less than half an hour, George had already read through all the books in the bookstore, gaining a more detailed understanding of this world. How about taking over the entire Piltover? After putting down the last book and pondering for a moment, a new idea suddenly popped into George's mind. In his view, all the guards in Piltover combined were no match for him, so why not take over the entire city and control it? This way, he would have a base in this world and could use Piltover's trading capabilities to obtain the intelligence and resources he wanted from all over the world. It would be much more efficient than searching the world one by one. Then I'll take Piltover and Zon below it in a week, and control the world's largest trading city, the City of Progress, in my hands. He got up and left the bookstore, beginning to refine his next plan. However, as soon as he pushed open the door, a very burly figure blocked his way. "Hello, you must be George." George looked at the burly man in front of him, then at Vi and her companions behind him, who were clutching their foreheads, looking helpless and unwilling. A thought struck him. He already had a plan. Perhaps he could use the conflict between the lower and upper city to quickly and reasonably achieve his goal. If they were to conquer by force, not only would it easily lead to rebellions later, but it would also arouse suspicion from other countries and forces in the surrounding area. It might even alarm some Protoss. However, if it were an internal conflict between the lower and upper city districts, then no one would think much of it. After all, it had happened frequently before, and everyone knew about it. "It's me, and who are you?" "My name is Vander, the owner of the Fusion Tavern over there, and also V's father. There's a problem with those blue glass beads she sold you. Could you please return them to me? Here's the gold you paid." The burly man took out the gold, a kind smile on his face. "I'm sorry if this has caused you any inconvenience. Your expenses at the Fusion Tavern will be free for the next week. By the way, besides drinks, the tavern also provides food and lodging, all free of charge. Do you think the price is too low? I can add more money. How about 10? George pulled out another 9 pieces of gold of the same size from his pocket. This time, not only V and the others behind him, but even Vander's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that a child like George could be so wealthy. Chapter 530 George, the man who can never get drunk. Could he be some young master who ran away from a noble family in Dalmatia? Vander muttered to himself, placing the gold bar on top of the 9 gold bars in George's hand. It's not about the money, it's about the fact that these things come from the upper city. If we don't hand them over, not only will we be in trouble, but you'll also be in a lot of trouble. In that case, alright, George smiled, put away all 10 gold bars, took out the bag of hextouch crystals, and handed it to Vander's large hand. Would handing them over make a difference? Vander, this future werewolf, was sometimes too naive. The upper city's higher-ups didn't care about the hextouch crystals at all. They hadn't yet realized their value. What they cared about was that the people from the lower city dared to cause trouble in the upper city, which was tantamount to provocation. If such provocation wasn't severely punished, the people from the lower city would become increasingly rampant, to the point of repeating the Great War of a few years ago. So even if Vander handed over these crystals, the upper city wouldn't let it go. However, this was exactly what he wanted. He needed this kind of conflict to achieve his goal and seize control of Piltover as quickly as possible. Thank you. If you plan to stay in the alley for a while, feel free to contact me if you encounter any trouble. Vander's expression immediately relaxed after receiving the bag of magic crystals. In fact, according to the rules of the alley, it's a cash-on-delivery transaction, and no matter what the source or type of goods are, they cannot be forcibly retrieved. So if George didn't want to, there was nothing he could do. He set the rules, and he couldn't break them. I heard the grapefruit rum at Fusion's Tavern is quite good. I wonder if I could have a glass. George waved to V and the others behind Vander, then looked at Vander. Vander laughed heartily. Of course, I'll personally mix you a supreme version, but it's very strong. Are you sure you can handle it? In his eyes, George was still a child about the same age as Boom, only he spoke with more maturity, acting like a little adult. George walked past Vander and headed towards Fusion's Tavern. Don't underestimate me. I can drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk. How about we have a contest? Forget 1,000 cups. With his physique, he could drink 1,000 barrels without a scratch. 3 hours later, at Fusion's Tavern, Wei and Bao looked at Vander, passed out on the table, surrounded by a pile of glasses. They glanced at George across from them, his face flushed, his eyes glazed, but he was still barely conscious, and simultaneously gave him a thumbs up. Vander was the biggest drinker in the alley, and they had never seen him drunk before, yet George had managed to take him down. Although George himself looked like he was about to pass out. Not only the two sisters, but all the other burly men in the tavern looked at George with admiration. It wasn't that Vander was weak, the kid was simply a drinking barrel. He could drink too much. Ha ha ha. Now when Vander wakes up, we can laugh at him. Although Vander's loss wasn't undeserved, it wouldn't stop them from laughing at him about it for months to come. Good lad, impressive. Just for taking down Vandal. If you need anything in this alley, come find Brother Leopard. The burly men in the tavern were instantly impressed with George. In a place like Fusion Tavern, there are two ways to earn respect. One is strength, that is, whoever has the biggest fist is the boss, and Vandal's fist is the biggest here, so he is the boss. The other is drinking capacity, because many things are settled by drinking contests when people don't want to fight or get hurt. Before, Vandal was the biggest drinker here, but now it's George. Just as everyone in the tavern was getting into a heated discussion about the 3-hour drinking contest, the tavern door was suddenly kicked open. A man and a woman wearing gas masks and gorgeous blue uniforms walked in. When everyone saw the two, their expressions changed instantly, the warm atmosphere plummeted to freezing point, and their faces turned hostile. Damn it, it's those filthy cops from the upper city. V gritted her teeth, put on her hood, and pulled her sister, Bao, behind the crowd. They'd been chased by law enforcement guards in the upper city, their faces already exposed. Where's Vander? A male law enforcement guard, having removed his gas mask, demanded with disgust. His contemptuous gaze and arrogant tone made the burly men in the tavern reach for their weapons. If Vander hadn't repeatedly warned them against conflict with the upper city people, they would have already chopped these two up and fed them to the shadow wolves. Seeing this, the female law enforcement officer in charge stopped the male guard from speaking further. She glanced around the tavern hall, walked over to the now drunk Vander, and frowned. Her name was Grayson, the head of Piltover's law enforcement guards. She had received a strict order from the council to arrest and imprison those thieves who dared to cause trouble in the upper city, as a warning to others. Unlike other law enforcement guards, she understood that the current peace between the upper and lower city was hard-won and didn't want to ignite another war over this. Therefore, she reached an agreement with Vander, the leader of the lower city's alleyways. As long as the lower city residents didn't cause trouble in the upper city, she wouldn't interfere with the lower city's illegal activities. Now that trouble had arisen, to appease the council's anger and avoid a major conflict, she came to Vander beforehand to have him hand over the thieves. Unexpectedly, Vander was drunk at this crucial moment. Vander is drunk. What can I do for you two? The second in command of the alleyways, Vander's best friend, and the owner of the general store, approached with a friendly smile. We've come to ask Vander for some prisoners, Grayson replied calmly. The male law enforcement guard behind her spoke arrogantly again. A building in the Academy district was attacked by a few scoundrels. Hand over those scoundrels, or our enforcement team will raise your entire alley. What did you say? I'll kill you first, you little white pig. Everyone in the tavern drew their weapons, and the male law enforcement guard also drew his pistol. Stop. At this moment, the shopkeeper and Grayson spoke up simultaneously to stop both sides. These are your lost items. The children will receive their due punishment and will not cause trouble in the upper city again. Let's just let this matter go." Taking the bag of magic crystals from Vander's pocket and handing it to Grayson, the shopkeeper whispered. Vander had discussed the handling of this matter with him before drinking. Grayson put away the magic crystals but shook her head. "No. This time we must hand over those children, otherwise next time it won't just be the two of us, but the entire enforcement team." She didn't even need Vander to hand them over, as long as Vander told her where the children were, or that she wouldn't obstruct her when she led the team to search. Chapter 531. When you see injustice, you should roar. When it's time to act, you should act. It's them. I've seen the portrait. Just then, the male law enforcement guard spotted Bayo and Wei standing at the back of the crowd and immediately shouted. Wei knew that being caught now would implicate Vander, so she grabbed Bayo and rushed towards the back door. Grayson and the male law enforcement guards saw this and gave chase, but they were blocked by a human wall of burly men from the tavern. "You're asking for death? I'm going to arrest you all." The male law enforcement guard raised his pistol, but Grayson pressed it down. "Marcus, stop, not to mention that a conflict shouldn't occur now for the sake of the bigger picture. Even if a conflict did occur, they should bring enough men." The two of them were no match for so many. However, for some reason, Marcus didn't listen to his superior Grayson and fired a shot, hitting one of the burly men in the thigh. Seeing Marcus make his move, the burly men in the tavern could no longer hold back and began to swarm and retaliate, ignoring the shop owner's shouts. Meanwhile, George, sitting opposite Vander, gradually smiled. Marcus's shot was obviously tampered with, and Vander's continued unconsciousness was also due to his manipulation. Even the arrogant Marcus wasn't stupid. He wouldn't actually fire a gun when outnumbered, he just wanted to intimidate. He used his abilities to make the pistol fire that bullet. Vander wasn't without self-control either. He wouldn't drink to the point of unconsciousness. He used a stun spell. The purpose of all this was simple, to incite conflict while Vander was distracted and escalate the situation. Marcus and Grayson were alone in the cramped tavern, unable to effectively use firearms, forced into hand-to-hand combat, and were quickly subdued and tied up by a group of burly men. If the general store owner hadn't intervened, they would likely have been torn to pieces. This is troublesome. Looking at the unconscious, bruised and battered Grayson and Vander still fast asleep on the table, the general store owner was at his wit's end. He didn't know what to do now. "I've had enough. I'd rather fight them." The burly men in the tavern were all eager for a fight, showing no fear whatsoever. The grocer, however, was stern. "What are you talking about? Have you forgotten how many of us died 6 years ago? What can we do? We've already fought. Besides, we can't let them take a few kids away." The burly men in the tavern were all Vander's henchmen, and they all knew Wei and Bayo, treating them like their own children. They couldn't accept handing over these kids to appease the anger of the upper city. The argument went on, but to no avail. The grocer tried to wake Vander, but perhaps because he was too drunk, he wouldn't wake up. "Just hand me over. Say I did it all by myself, that I'm the one who started this mess." At this moment, Wei, returning to the tavern with her friends, stepped forward. Vander had said she was the leader, and the leader had to take responsibility. Things had escalated beyond repair, and she didn't want Vander and her uncles to lose their lives because of her. "No, I disagree," the burly men objected, even the grocery store owner, because he believed Vander would never hand over V. Just then, the tavern door was pushed open again. "It's bad. A large number of enforcement teams from the upper city have crossed the Piltover Bridge and are heading towards the alley." "I knew it." George wasn't surprised. The rebellion in the lower city had only been 6 years ago. Even if Grayson trusted Vander, he wouldn't be completely unprepared. Besides, Vander didn't have complete control over the lower city. There was also the cunning and ruthless Hilco. "Let's fight them." At this point, there was no point in saying anything more. The burly men in the tavern, holding Grayson and Marcus hostage, rallied their friends, preparing to fight the enforcement team to the death. Boom, you take care of Vander. If he wakes up, tell him to come over immediately," the grocery store owner said helplessly, giving a few instructions to the children before following them. Seeing the general store owner leave, V gritted her teeth. "Don't wander around here, I'm going to help." Everyone was fighting because of the trouble she had caused. She couldn't just stay in the back. "Let's go. Together, let's take them down." At this moment, George staggered off his seat. V shook her head. "Thank you, George, but this isn't your fault. The lower city is going to be chaotic. You'd better get out of here. She had heard from Bayo Bayo that George was quite capable, able to slap a thug flying, but that thug was just a big boy, no match for Piltover's law enforcement. Besides, George was drunk. How could he fight? George, when I travel, I'm all about loyalty and camaraderie with my friends. I'll speak up when I see injustice, and I'll act when it's time to fight, George roared, punching the wall beside him, blasting a large hole in it, then emerging from the hole and chasing after the burly men. Hiss, looking at the large hole blasted into the wall beside them, V and the others gasped simultaneously. Fights among drunks in taverns were common, and to ensure the walls wouldn't need frequent repairs, Vander hadn't used wood. Instead, they were made of sturdy rock from underground. Even Vander couldn't have punched such a large hole. I'll go after him. You guys take Vander to the secret room below and don't come out. V quickly crawled out of the hole and ran towards George. At the entrance to the alley, three forces confronted each other. One side consisted of Piltover law enforcement officers in blue uniforms, carrying long guns. Another side was the general store owner leading burly men from the alley armed with various melee weapons, and the last side was Hilko, who had arrived with all his men after hearing the news. He had assumed that, given Vander's personality, he would take the blame for the children. He had already bribed Marcus, intending to kill Grayson and take down Vander. If Vander was willing to admit his past betrayal, he would forgive him and fight together again in the upper city. If Vander refused, he would kill Vander, slowly take over the entire lower city, and then overthrow the upper city. However, to his surprise, the news that came was that Vander's men had captured Marcus and Grayson and were going to war with the upper city. So he immediately summoned all his men to see if Vander had finally come to his senses, but he couldn't find Vander anywhere. Chapter 532 I'm going to fight 10. Where's Vander? Hilko, leading the newly created enhanced human, approached the head of the general store. The store owner replied somewhat awkwardly, Vander's drunk, still not sober, otherwise he wouldn't be in this state. Drunk. Hilko's lips twitched. He never expected it to be because of this. He thought Vander had finally come to his senses. Who could get him drunk? The store owner stammered, unsure how to explain. He couldn't very well say that his boss had lost a drinking contest to an 11-year-old. It was fine for his own people to laugh, but if Hilko, his rival, saw it, it would be a disgrace to his boss. At this moment, the leading law enforcement officer on the other side shouted sternly, hand over Commander Grayson and Marcus, then lay down your weapons and accept interrogation, or today will be your end. We can return Grayson, but you must leave immediately, or today we'll all fight to the death. The grocer's owner ordered his men to hold knives to Grayson and Marcus's necks, equally unwilling to back down. At this point, they couldn't back down, or they'd be in big trouble, but they couldn't actually fight either. They needed to stall for time until Vander sobered up and took charge. After learning the truth, Hilko signaled his men to take a few steps back. Since it was a misunderstanding, there was no need to fight to the death. It would be better to watch the two sides fight and then reap the benefits. Your conditions are impossible. I'll say it again, hand over Commander Grayson and Marcus. The law enforcement officer on the other side waved his hand, and all the Piltover law enforcement guards simultaneously raised their guns. Firing a gun was out of the question, their superior was still in the enemy's hands. But intimidation was necessary. If they could scare them into releasing the hostage, then firing wouldn't be too late. The grocer was also stalling, not releasing the hostage, just making empty threats while the burly men brandished their weapons. Just as the three sides were locked in a standoff, a figure stumbled into the middle. So you're here to mess with my brother, huh? Get lost, or I'll beat you up. George, feigning drunkenness, pointed at the Piltover enforcer, his face full of impatience. The enforcer, seeing the young George, initially wanted to have him driven away, but seeing his imposing presence, he asked, who's your brother? My brother, Vander. We just became sworn brothers over drinks. Although he's never drunk as much as me, he's still my sworn brother. If you dare mess with him, you're messing with me. George thumped his chest and shouted. Just now, when Vandal was drunk, he did indeed call him brother, and he took the opportunity to acknowledge Vandal as his older brother. So what he's saying now is perfectly reasonable. Otherwise, it wouldn't be legitimate for an outsider like him to help. That Vandal guy, he actually lost to such a little brat in a drinking contest. It seems he's really getting worse. Hearing George's words, Hilko almost burst out laughing. From now on, every time he sees Vandal, He'll bring this up to mock him and put Vandal's arrogance to good rest. Of course, there's no guarantee there won't be a future after today. Let's see if Vandal can survive with the enforcers. If Vandal wasn't prepared to go to war with Piltover, he definitely wouldn't have helped. He didn't want to be betrayed again. On the contrary, he could take this opportunity to get rid of Vandal. Even if the plan changes, as long as the result remains the same, that's fine. George, don't go over there, come back. At this moment, V finally caught up and saw that George had actually rushed into the middle of the three sides. She quickly stepped forward to pull him back. Unfortunately, her strength was no match for George's. No matter how hard she pulled, she couldn't budge him. George, V, come over here. The grocer, seeing this, quickly called out to the two. He couldn't go forward to pull them. If he did, the other side would think a fight was about to break out, and then it would be impossible to stop. Oh, so you're one of Vander's men. Looks like you're one of those thieves too. Men, take them down. Upon hearing George claim to be Vander's brother and that the thieves had appeared, the enforcer immediately ordered two of his men to take them down. If they could quickly capture these two children, they might be able to exchange them for Grayson and Marcus. Brother V, step aside quickly, let me handle them. Seeing two Piltover guards rushing over, V immediately tried to stop them, but George shoved her towards the grocer, preventing him from helping. George, V cried out in surprise as the two Piltover guards reached for George's arm after being caught by the grocer. Although George had previously demonstrated the power to smash through the tavern wall with a single punch, he was now drunk and incoherently calling her brother, even confusing age with age. However, the next second, everyone froze. Slap. Slap. Just as the two guards' hands were about to touch George's arms, George swiftly raised his hand and slapped them squarely across the face. The slaps were indeed quite forceful, sending the two guards flying to the sides. They didn't die upon landing, but they were knocked unconscious. Is this all you've got? You dare cause trouble in my brother's territory? Come on, let's continue. George arrogantly extended a hand, beckoning a finger to the enforcer. The enforcer immediately turned red with anger, thankfully wearing a gas mask. Four of you, take him down. In this tense situation, for a Piltover guard to be provoked by a small boy in the alley was intolerable. If this got back to the counselors, he'd be fired as deputy law enforcement officer. Slap. 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 4 slaps rang out, and the 4 guards who had just stepped forward were sent flying, following in the footsteps of the first 2. Seeing this, Wei and the burly men who had initially wanted to help immediately stopped and retreated, raising their weapons and shouting. Ha ha ha, George is mighty, well done, George, let them see the might of our black alley, George, from now on, besides Vander, I, Brother Leopard, only respect you. The deputy law enforcement officer was furious. He never expected this kid to have such strength. 4 adult guards were no match for him. But he couldn't very well let the guards shoot the kid, that would be an even bigger loss of face. I'll take on 10, after slapping the 4 men away, George arrogantly held up 10 fingers, continuing to taunt the law enforcement officer. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 533 Under a Slap, no one could withstand it. 10 of them, the law enforcement officer slammed his spear into the ground, gritting his teeth as he commanded, each word distinct. He was now completely pinned down. With the 2 sides locked in a stalemate, his leader captured and unable to decisively engage, his morale was already low. Then this child, so small, appeared, slapping 8 guards away. While 8 guards were insignificant to the entire enforcement team, this further dampened their spirits, making them even weaker in a real fight. He had already sent someone to consult the council, but until then, he couldn't allow this child to continue his arrogance. Slap. 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 10 guards pounced on George like hungry tigers, then almost simultaneously, they all flew back like a shower of petals. Slaps, more slaps. These were the 10 strongest guards in the enforcement team, experts who could easily take on 3 or 4 opponents at once. Even joining forces couldn't stop the little boy's slap. Not only were the enforcement team stunned, But everyone on both the grocery store owners and Hilco's sides was also dumbfounded. Hilco even glanced at his secret weapon, the enhanced human using the glimmering light. He had been quite confident in his enhanced human's combat abilities, but now he hesitated. He wasn't sure if the enhanced human could defeat the little boy. After all, even an enhanced human couldn't send 10 of Piltover's strongest guards flying in the blink of an eye. This is impossible. The enforcement officer's lips twitched. He truly hadn't expected this result. He had been careless before. The guards who had stepped forward were generally weak and underestimated the little boy, so he could understand being ambushed and knocked away. But this time, even with 10 of the strongest guards cautiously attacking, the result was the same. This was too abnormal. Just who was this little boy? A Yordle? He didn't look like one. Professor Heimerdinger, the most respected member of the council, was a Yordle, with a lifespan of 300 years, and his height was about that of a 10-year-old child. Yordles are a long-lived race, said to live to tens of thousands of years old. However, their appearance is easily distinguishable. The little boy clearly has a normal human face and couldn't possibly be a centuries-old Yordle fighting master. Just as the enforcer was debating whether to send more people to fight the little boy, a guard quickly approached from behind and whispered a few words in his ear. Everyone on the other side, immediately drop your weapons and kneel down to surrender. Hearing the guard's words, the enforcer took a deep breath and continued to shout, all guards, listen up. Attack with full force. Anyone who disobeys will be killed. The guard had already relayed the situation to the council. After deliberation among the 6 council members, except for Professor Heimerdinger, the other 5 unanimously decided to conduct a major purge of the Black Alley. Even if it meant sacrificing Grayson and Marcus, they wanted to let the people of the lower city know that the dignity of the upper city was absolutely inviolable. They couldn't allow the riots of 6 years ago to repeat themselves. Although the upper city ultimately won the rebellion 6 years ago, it came at a considerable cost. The Piltover guards, densely packed together, expertly cocked their rifles. Surrender? All surrender to your grandma. Brothers, let's get them. None of the burly men were willing to surrender. They charged towards the law enforcement team, weapons in hand. Hilk, on the other hand, narrowed his eyes and led his men back again, until they were out of the fighting range. Get them. Get them. George, hearing this, also shouted, feigning excitement as he led the charge towards the law enforcement team. This was the effect he wanted. Everything that had happened today was reasonable, plausible, and without any conspiracy. However, in the struggle between the lower and upper city districts, there was this drunken, slap-wielding hero leading the charge for his brothers. This caused a subtle change in the outcome, preventing it from developing in the original direction. Afterwards, when everyone reflected on it, nothing seemed amiss. He was just drunk, acting a little crazy to help his brothers. Just like in real life, when a group of friends get drunk and someone comes looking for trouble, the others will inevitably grab chairs and fight. He might not act that way when he's sober, but when he's drunk, impulsiveness is to be expected. He actually had simpler methods, such as directly going to the upper city and using mind control spells like Imperious and Double-Edged Sword to control the counselors. Or he could use magic to control Evander in the lower city and lead his forces to attack the upper city directly. With his strength, he could easily take Piltover, using its powerful trade network to collect spellbooks and runes from various places, as well as all sorts of useful intelligence. But in a multiverse-level world like this, the truth will eventually come out. Especially using magical power, he could easily be seen as a villain, leading to a massacre by the heroes, which was unnecessary. He preferred to be safe and use the least troublesome method to achieve his goal, even if it took a few more days. He estimated a week, but at the current pace, it might only take a day. Bang 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 bang. George took the lead, skillfully dodging the bullets fired at him with unsteady steps, and charged straight into the Piltover guard. The first slap sent the enforcer flying, followed by a flurry of slaps within the guards. No one could withstand his blows. Those struck were sent flying, unconscious. It was precisely because George led the charge and immediately slapped the enforcer, like a dagger piercing through, that the Piltover guards were thrown into disarray. They didn't know whether to aim their guns at him or at George. Finally, the burly men from the alleyways followed closely, scattering them into a chaotic melee. 6 years ago, the main reason the lower city lost to the upper city was that the upper city's technology was far superior. While most of the lower cities' inhabitants were still using melee weapons and dressed in tattered clothes, the upper cities' guards were already armed to the teeth and wore protective suits made of special materials. Therefore, as soon as the battle began, the lower cities' people were mowed down wave after wave of spearmen, and by the time they finally engaged in hand-to-hand combat at the Piltover Bridge, few remained. That's why Vander gave up fighting, retreated with the remaining men, and signed a treaty with the upper city. Too many people had already died because of his resistance. It was at this time that Hilko parted ways with Vander, believing him to be a coward who had betrayed their initial agreement. But now things were different. The people in the alley hadn't lost a single one, while the enforcement team had already been nearly wiped out by George alone, and were being directly engaged in close combat with melee weapons by the burly men. Chapter 534 Charging upwards into the urban area. How could this be? It's a one-sided route. Standing at a distance, Hilko stared wide-eyed at how the mighty Piltover enforcement team had become so vulnerable under the leadership of the drunken George. At this rate, the main fighting force of the upper city, the Piltover enforcement team, would soon be completely crushed here. What would that mean? It meant that the upper city would be plunged into an unprecedented vacuum. If they seized this opportunity, their long-cherished wish to defeat the upper city and liberate the people of the lower city from their suffering and allow them to live in the upper city would be easily fulfilled today. This was practically a windfall. His original plan was to completely control the lower city, then spend 10 years developing it, using alchemical research to create a large army of enhanced humans, and then launch a rebellion to crush the upper city enforcement team. Now, it seemed unnecessary. Since that was the case, he didn't need to wait another 10 years, he would take the upper city today. Follow me. Take down these guards with all your might, then storm the upper city. Hilko drew his dagger and led all his men towards the battlefield. He had barely joined the fray when George slapped him across the face, sending him flying. HMPH, reinforcements 2. Take this, how dare he hit the boss? Beat him up. Hilko's men, enraged that George had knocked Hilko unconscious, charged at him first. George, however, showed no mercy, cleanly slapping them all away, including the intimidatingly powerful enhanced man. This battle was a sure win. Therefore, he didn't want Hilko's forces involved. If Hilko joined with his men, and then made demands after the victory, George feared Vander would be soft-hearted and take a share. Vander was an honest man, not cunning, principled, and had his own bottom line. If Vander became Piltover's ruler, given what he had done today and his subsequent plans, he could easily control him without magic. But Hilko was different. His mind was full of schemes, incredibly shrewd. It was better to simply kick him out of Piltover's future ruling class. I don't even know you, Hilko. I'm drunk and seeing you charging this way. Isn't it normal to mistake you for an enemy? And then your henchman attacked me, so I'll be polite. All of this makes sense. The grocer over there was taking down the last Piltover guard. Seeing George take down Hilko's men, he didn't say anything to stop him. The situation was settled now. Hilko's help wasn't needed. Taking him down was good, to avoid further trouble. With Vander not around, he couldn't control Hilko. The only thing that surprised him was how strong George was. He slapped everyone he saw. It was terrifying. He shouldn't let him drink so much in the future. If he got drunk and started causing trouble, even all of them combined wouldn't be enough for him to slap. But thankfully George was there, otherwise, many people would probably have died today, and they were all from the lower city. But what to do now? The grocer and the group of burly men looked bewildered. They'd had enough of the upper city's wrath over the years, so they were easily provoked, thinking they'd just go for it, without considering the possibility of actually winning. At this moment, V, with her strong sense of self, stepped forward. Most of the guards in the upper city are here. They have almost no defenses left. This is a rare opportunity. Let's storm the upper city now, take down all those nobles, and accomplish what we couldn't do 6 years ago. Her parents had died tragically on the Piltover Bridge 6 years ago, and she had sworn to one day crush the upper city. Now the time had come. Thanks to the unexpected help of George, they had actually defeated most of the Piltover guards in the upper city. Before the upper city could react, they could storm the council and bring down all those higher-ranking nobles. From then on, they would no longer have to defer to the upper city. Should we wait until Vander wakes up? The grocer hesitated, unsure of what to do. Waiting for Vander to arrive will be too late. If you won't go, I will. V put on her now red glove gauntlets and asked George, George, Will you help me? We're brothers. It's just a matter of a word. George, drunk, put his arm around V, showing no fear, and readily agreed. V is right, I agree. A burly man slung his Piltover guard's rifle over his shoulder, and the others followed suit. Despite being only 14, V had defeated more Piltover guards than anyone else except George in the recent battle. Moreover, she was Vander's most favored daughter. Vander had said that after his death, V would succeed him as the leader of the Black Alley. Most importantly, George was still willing to help them. With George around, they weren't afraid, even if there were still guards in the upper city. Alright, then charge with me. V raised her right hand, shouted, and, pulling the drunken George along, led the charge towards the bridge between the upper and lower city. On the bridge, the few Piltover guards who routinely guarded it were terrified when they saw V leading a dense army of Black Alley guards charging towards them. Back off. Back off. According to regulations, you can't enter the upper city. They had barely raised their rifles to shout when they were engulfed by the army. And so, the bridge that seemed like an insurmountable chasm separating the people of the upper and lower cities was crossed so easily today. About 200 years ago, there was no distinction between the upper and lower cities. They were collectively known as Zon. Zon was originally an insignificant trading post in the north of ancient Shurima, but fortunately, it avoided much involvement in the Void's crises. As time progressed and the geographical location of Aloran was gradually developed, trade increased significantly. At this time, the convenience of the sea route where Zon was located became apparent. To further expand trade between East and West and reap even greater profits, the city's councilors implemented the Sun Gate plan. This involved using massive amounts of explosives to forcibly blast a sea route wide enough for ships from both East and West to pass through. It succeeded, but an accident occurred. The continuous explosions caused frequent earthquakes, dividing Zon into several parts. One part rose, one part sank, and another was swallowed by the sea. Later, the risen part became independent and was named Piltver, meaning above the Piltover Canal. The lower part inherited the name Zuon. Chapter 535 Waking up from a drunken stupor, the world has changed? The nobles and merchants of Zon were all concentrated in Piltover, while the commoners were concentrated in Zon itself. Piltover controlled the land and water transportation on both sides of the continent, and with its strong foundation, it became increasingly prosperous, with its culture and technology becoming increasingly advanced. Zon was originally inhabited by commoners, and lacking other ways to make money, they could only focus on the chemical industry and alchemy, selling cheap labor in the factories opened by upper city merchants in the lower city. Therefore, the upper city was always civilized, prosperous, and clean, while the lower city suffered from various forms of pollution and viruses due to the various wastewater, garbage, and alchemical fumes from the factories. Precisely because of the severe pollution in the lower city, even the guards from the upper city wore gas masks when they came down, and rarely came down to inspect. This gave the lower city an additional source of income, the black market for contraband. Many outsiders, while visiting the bustling city of Piltover, would also go to the dark alleys of the lower city to pick up contraband and take it away. 6 years ago, the people of the lower city had had enough of the exploitation by the people of the upper city and decided to launch a rebellion to seize control of the upper city by force. Their goal was to ensure their descendants wouldn't have to live in poison gas, but could live and learn like the children of upper city. The leaders were Vander and Hilko. However, the technological disparity was too great. Cold weapons were no match for firearms. Ultimately, after suffering heavy casualties, they were forced to retreat. They never managed to cross the insurmountable Piltover Bridge and set foot on upper city soil. But today, they did it. Led by V and George, they not only crossed the bridge but also fought their way through, breaking through all defenses, storming the council building, capturing the 6 high-ranking councilors, and successfully taking control of the entire upper city's armed forces. Stop the spell. Seeing that the entire upper city was under V's and the Black Alley's control, George pretended to be drunk and lay down on a bench in the council hall. At the same time, he secretly and remotely dispelled Vander's stun spell. In the basement of the Fusion Tavern, Vander slowly opened his eyes and sat up, rubbing his forehead and muttering, "This kid can really drink. I never thought that after all these years, Vander, would actually be defeated by him. They're going to laugh themselves to death now. Vander, you're finally awake." Bao, who had been watching over him, burst into tears and threw herself into his arms as soon as she saw Vander wake up. My sister and the others are fighting with the guards from the upper city. You have to go save her." "What?" Vander was shocked upon hearing this. After quickly getting the general situation from Bao and the other two, he grabbed his boxing gloves and rushed out. He never expected that such a big thing would happen in the short few hours he was drunk. As the leader of the riot 6 years ago, he knew that the outcome of this conflict would inevitably be the same as 6 years ago, so he had to get there quickly to stop it. He ran all the way, and when he arrived at the place where the three sides had been facing off, he was completely stunned. The ground was littered with unconscious Piltover guards and Hilco's group, but V and most of the Black Alley brothers were nowhere to be seen. "Boss, you're here." A few of the wounded and those left behind rushed excitedly to Vander's aid upon seeing him. Before Vander could even ask, they launched into a long explanation of the previous battle. Who exactly is this George? Vander was stunned again. A drunken George, single-handedly, had taken down most of the Piltover guards and even Sylvanus's side. This was power only a Protoss could possess. Yet, in the many myths, there was no mention of any Protoss who could drink so much. Perhaps he was simply ignorant. He'd heard that many powerful beings existed in the outer cities, and it seemed it was all true. Reaching the Piltover Bridge, looking at the bridge that countless brothers and sisters had sacrificed to cross, his eyes welled up with tears. "I hope everything goes well." Not seeing the bodies of his Black Alley brothers, he breathed a slight sigh of relief and crossed a bridge, running towards the upper city. His previous reluctance to fight the upper city again, his constant tolerance of their exploitation, wasn't because he truly wanted to be a slave to the upper city. It was because so many people died in the battle 6 years ago, and so many children lost their parents and loved ones, becoming orphans. He didn't want anyone else to sacrifice themselves, so he had to compromise. But if there really was a chance to take over the upper city, fulfill his past ideals, and without any sacrifices, how could he not want it? Running wildly, seeing that most of the streets were under the control of his brothers in the alleys, his heart gradually calmed down. When he arrived at the council hall and saw V was safe and sound, he finally felt completely relieved. "V, it's so good that you're all alright. Vander, you're awake. We've taken the upper city. We'll never be looked down upon again." When V saw Vander appear, she threw away her blood-stained gloves and excitedly rushed forward to hug him. No matter how strong and brave she was still only a 14-year-old girl. After experiencing so much killing, it was impossible for her not to feel any fear. "V, you are my pride." Vander patted V's back, looked at George sleeping on the recliner, and began to think about the follow-up work. While the upper city was indeed captured by force, complete control and the restoration of their ideal zone will not be easy. Piltover is a trading city, with a vast amount of wealth concentrated in its upper city. Rumors circulate that you can find a piece of gold every 5 steps in Piltover. While exaggerated, this illustrates the undeniable wealth of Piltover. Previously, the advanced weaponry of Piltover's guards provided some deterrent, and the various counselors, merchants, and powerful external forces maintained good relationships, managing to resist external covetousness of Piltover's wealth. However, now they have taken down all of Piltover's guards and its high-ranking officials. Without sufficient forces to resist external threats, Piltover will likely be quickly devoured by these powers. Not to mention, Noxus, the closest neighbor, with its war-loving and plundering madmen. Will they let such a large piece of meat as Piltover slip by? Noxus didn't attack Piltover before because one of Piltover's counselors, Mel, is the daughter of the head of the Nox and Medarda family. The Medarda family is one of the most powerful families in Noxus. Therefore, he needs to find enough power to protect Piltover to ensure the stable development of the new zone after unifying the upper and lower cities. Perhaps I should find a way to keep him here. If a drunk George is already so formidable, wouldn't a sober George be even more powerful? The future new zone needs this force. Chapter 536 Prince George of Zoon. Perfect. George, who was secretly observing Vander's thoughts with his mental power, smiled slightly. Everything was going according to plan. After reading the books in the bookstore in the lower city, he had a certain assessment of the situation on the entire continent of Valoran. Piltover was currently the richest of the 10 cities on the continent, even surpassing Noxus and Demacia in wealth. However, in terms of overall strength, it ranked last among the 10 cities. If it weren't for the support of advanced firearms, it would be simply unbearable to look at. This was a world known for its magic, yet Piltover actually rejected magic, considering it dangerous and only capable of causing harm. How could mortals fight against those who knew magic? Demacia, at least, had anti-magic stones everywhere, and their armor could ignore most magical damage, bringing mages down to the level of ordinary people for melee combat. You think you can fight against their wide-range magic with a small rifle? The only truly powerful being was the legendary wind goddess Janna, who could casually conjure storms and destroy cities, but she generally wouldn't appear unless there was a major crisis. If Vandal didn't want those counselors to regain control of the news on and revert to the old ways, he would definitely need Vandal's assistance, given his demonstrated strength. Besides, he was the biggest contributor to this event. The next day, under Vandal's personal leadership, all resistance forces in Piltover were wiped out, and both the lower and upper cities fell under his control. However, he didn't kill the counselors and higher-ranking officials, he merely stripped them of their political rights, turning them back into normal merchants. Vandal wasn't like Hilko, he wasn't that brutal. He wanted the people of the lower and upper cities to receive the same treatment. Moreover, he knew that if Piltover wanted to maintain its current wealth, it would need these merchants. Especially professors like Heimerdinger, who Vandal treated with great courtesy, personally escorting them back to the academy that very day. Piltover's technology had reached its current level entirely thanks to Heimerdinger and the academy he founded. Heimerdinger was also the only counselor among them who sympathized with the lower city. His academy also admitted talented students from the lower city without discrimination. Sorry, I was drunk yesterday. Did I cause you any trouble? George, waking up, rubbed his forehead, feigning a hangover, and asked Vander and the others who had rushed over because he woke up. No, absolutely not, Vander quickly said, raising his hand. Trouble? Without your help, we wouldn't have been able to take Piltover yesterday. That's good. Looks like I can't drink next time. I black out when I drink, which isn't a good thing, George nodded. At this moment, Vandal's eyes lit up. Little brother, how can you not drink? Just a little is fine. If you want to drink next time, your brother will drink with you anytime. Brother, V and the others looked at Vandal, blinking involuntarily. George was also somewhat surprised and asked, Mr. Vandal, what brother? Brother George, have you forgotten? We had a great time drinking yesterday, and you've already acknowledged me as your brother. From today onwards, you, George, are my younger brother, Vandal's own brother, and His Highness the Prince of Nuzon. Vandal turned to V and the others. Come on. Call him uncle. Nuzon merged the upper and lower cities. After discussion, they decided to abolish the original Piltover Council system and restore the imperial system of ancient Shurima. However, Nuzon was definitely no match for ancient Shurima, so Nuzon was established as a kingdom, and Vandal became the king of Nuzon through the election of the people. The process was similar to the Chinkyo mutiny and the scene of being forced to wear the yellow robe. Class is something that inevitably exists, even in the lower city. Those small-time leaders leading their men to fight for the lower city under Vander's command was fine, but after their success, they would undoubtedly want the honor and benefits. Vander understood this, so he didn't object and ascended to the throne of the Nuzon. None of this really mattered, as it was all perfectly logical. What truly troubled him was how to reasonably retain George while ensuring George willingly became a part of the Nuzon. After all, George was from Demacia and likely had a respectable background. After thinking about it all night, he finally had a clue. Taking advantage of drunken ramblings, he directly recognized George as his younger brother, bestowing upon him the title of Prince of the Nuzon, second only to himself. Given George's glorious achievements yesterday, everyone would probably accept it. Becoming the Prince of the Nuzon, second only to himself, he believed George's mindset would definitely change, and he wouldn't abandon the Nuzon if it were in danger. Huh? George feigned surprise, showing a confused expression, but secretly gave Vander a thumbs up. To come up with this idea, it seems Vander's mind is quite flexible, he's not a rigid person. Uncle George, Wei and Bao called out helplessly to George after Vander kept giving them meaningful glances. George looked about the same age as Bao, and calling him uncle was a bit difficult for him to say. This, George first rubbed his forehead, then said with relief, since you've acknowledged me as your brother, I'm truly honored. My two nieces, consider this your uncle's gift. He reached out and pulled, and two decorative great swords flew off the wall and landed in front of him. He spat out two mouthfuls of flame, and the great swords quickly fused into two clumps of molten iron. Then, countless magical runes flew into the molten iron, which rapidly condensed into a glove and a heavy machine gun. He made hand seals, and more runes flew in. condense, with a soft shout, the two magical artifacts, crafted using a fusion of alchemy and weapon forging techniques, were completed, gleaming with golden light, and landed in front of Wei and Bao. With his alchemy skills learned from various worlds and the newly acquired divine refinement technique, crafting two low-level magical artifacts was a piece of cake. Although they were only low-level artifacts, they were still formidable weapons in Piltover. V couldn't help but pick up the golden gauntlet and throw a punch forward. An invisible force flew out from the gauntlet, directly blasting down the wall of the room. This was a metal-constructed wall in the upper city, not a wooden wall in the lower city. Boom also reached out and picked up the heavy machine gun, finding it as light as a feather. He aimed at the wall that V had punched through and pressed the attack button. Countless fireballs shot out, exploding in the air above Piltover. Both dangerous and spectacular. They have many functions. You can drip a drop of your own blood on them and absorb it into your body at any time. Try them out slowly when you have time, George said with a smile, instructing the two on how to subdue the magical artifacts. Meanwhile, Vander was completely dumbfounded. He hadn't expected George to be a mage. Chapter 537 Hextech. Thank you, Uncle George. Under George's guidance, Wei and Bao were able to retract their fists and the heavy machine gun into their bodies. When they called him George, their awkwardness lessened considerably. The gift was simply too good, too perfect for them. Calling him uncle or even dad wouldn't be out of the question. George, are you a magician? Vander couldn't help but ask. The amazing ability George had just displayed could only be explained by magic. Actually, I lied to you at first. George looked up at the sky outside the breached wall and began to fabricate a story. I'm an orphan from Demetia who accidentally learned magic. But as everyone knows, magic is dangerous, and because of my research, my body permanently changed from an adult to this child's appearance. In reality, I'm over 30 years old. Demetia is a country that forbids the study of magic, and I didn't want to be arrested for it, so I left Demetia to travel. I came here hoping to find some new spellbooks in the black market of this trading city so I could continue my research and become a normal person again. No wonder, Vander suddenly realized. He wondered how George, who looked only 11 years old, could speak and act so maturely. And whose strength was ridiculously high. That explained it all. George, you can rest assured. As the Prince of the News On, you can continue your research on magic here, no one will stop you. Moreover, this is the center of world trade. If the original regulations are abolished, there will definitely be many books and items related to magic traded here, and you can find a way to restore normalcy. Zon, as a trading post of ancient Shurima, didn't have regulations prohibiting the use of magic. Later, after Zon split, Professor Heimerdinger opened an academy in Piltover to develop technology. Having experienced the horrors of the Rune Wars, he created regulations prohibiting the study of magic. In reality, compared to the general aversion to magic in Demetia, the people of Piltover were relatively indifferent to it. In places like the lower city of Zon, they didn't care at all. Being constantly exposed to toxic chemicals was far more dangerous than magic, wasn't it? It was only because Heimerdinger brought advanced technology that Piltover's economy developed rapidly, allowing merchants in the upper city to reap huge profits, that the counselors supported him. The Hextech magic technology created from the original research on magical runes brought enormous benefits to Piltover, and the counselors ignored the regulations despite Heimerdinger's objections. It was all about profit. Thank you so much. I will protect this city well, it's my second home, George responded to Vander's promise. This was the win-win situation he wanted. For him, protecting Piltover wasn't too difficult. Wars between ordinary nations posed no threat to him. He could use Piltover, a trading city, to discreetly collect runic magic from this world and focus on improving his magical abilities. Once he had nothing new to gain, he would leave Piltover to find demigods, ascended beings, celestials, and true gods to see if he could obtain more power. Restore to its original state, George said, restoring the shattered wall with a restoration spell, amidst Vander's astonished gazes. By the way, I saw that the blue magic crystal from last time contained magical runes. Could you help me find the owner who created those magic crystals? The Hextech magic crystals were created by Jace through research on magical runes, and that particular rune was given to him by Victor, who had already achieved mechanical ascension in the future, after traveling back in time. Therefore, that core rune from Hextech actually contains many magical laws of this world, which is very helpful for him to understand and learn the magic of this world. 3 days later, Piltover Academy. Did you make this magic crystal? George asked with a smile as he looked at Jace, who was being escorted over by the New Zone guards. Jace nodded nervously. Yes, Your Highness. He dared not be careless at all towards this seemingly harmless boy. 3 days ago, he had personally witnessed this boy leading dangerous elements from the lower city, utterly defeating all the Piltover guards who tried to stop him, and storming into the council building. Now that the New Zone had been established, the boy was even more powerful, second only to the king. With just one word from him, he could lose his head. In the past few days, many radicals who opposed the establishment of the New Zone had been beheaded, and they were all previously well-known figures in Piltover. Very good, I admire you. I heard that you want to control magic through technology, which I think is a very good idea. I wonder if you would be willing to continue trying. George stood up and walked to Jace's side. Hextech, a combination of technology and magic, was a new way for him to study magic, which naturally piqued his interest. Moreover, only by developing Hextech could he better decipher the magical runes sent by Victor in the future. With Hextech, Piltover's strength wouldn't be at the bottom. Really? You're willing to support my continued research? Jace immediately became excited upon hearing George's words. 3 days ago, due to the explosion of the magical crystal, he had been summoned by the council and presented his ideas. However, Professor Heimerdinger believed that technology couldn't control dangerous magic, so he was ultimately stripped of his right to continue research. Yes, I've also found you a helper. At this moment, George clapped his hands, and a guard brought in a young man leaning on a cane. The young man's face was filled with confusion. What are you trying to do? I'm a teaching assistant at the school, and I haven't participated in any events opposing the establishment of New Zone. Your name is Victor, right? Don't worry, I mean you no harm. I just brought you here to assist Mr. Jess in researching his Hextech theory. George pointed to Jess beside him. Victor looked at Jess and was immediately taken aback. So it's you? He was also present as Professor Heimerdinger's assistant on the day Jess was interrogated. Jess's words about Hextech, using technology to control magic for the benefit of the masses, had indeed moved him. He had originally planned to find a time to talk to Jess alone, but he hadn't expected that such a momentous event had occurred in the past few days, and all the teachers at the school had been ordered to remain on campus temporarily. By the way, I heard you have congenital ossification of muscle. That's not good, it will affect the efficiency of your research. George walked up to Victor, one hand enveloped in red aura, and then slapped it directly on Victor's head. At this moment, he was using the dual hand technique, capable of curing any disease. Chapter 538. I said, let there be light. My leg, enveloped in the red aura of the twin hands, Victor instantly felt as if his body had been reborn, especially his leg, which had been almost numb and had become strong again. After George removed his hands, Victor immediately let go of his crutches and excitedly ran around the room. So many years, so many years. I can finally walk like a normal person again. Tears streamed down his face. Thank you, Your Highness. Victor is willing to serve you for life. After calming down, Victor knelt on one knee and solemnly swore an oath to George. Born into a poor family in the lower-class Rift district of Zon, he was born lame and suffered from a rare, incurable disease, leaving him physically weak. He had always hoped to find a way to save himself through his intelligence, so he came to the upper city, eagerly absorbing its advanced knowledge. Unfortunately, even the advanced technology of the upper city couldn't cure his incurable disease, and his body grew increasingly weak. According to the doctors, his body would completely collapse in 7 or 8 years at most. That is to say, he would regretfully leave this world in his 30s, the prime of his life. However, now, under the prince's miraculous magical power, he felt healthier than ever before. Weakness and disease had all disappeared, even his lameness was cured. This was a life-saving grace, a rebirth, and how could he not be grateful? No need for a lifetime, just help him develop Hextech. George pointed to Jess, who was staring in disbelief. Jess stammered, Your Highness, you can use magic too. That's right, I'm a magician, so I'll be involved in the Hextech research. George nodded. 4 days later, in the lower city of New Zone, Vander, dressed in magnificent royal attire, looked awkward. I really don't understand why they like these clothes. They're so cumbersome to wear and make movement inconvenient. You're His Majesty the King now. You have to dress like this. It will reduce the resistance from the commoners in the upper city. The former general store owner, now the kingdom's governor, whispered to Vander. As king, he must look like one. Dressing appropriately is essential to displaying authority and deterring troublemakers. If he still wore his old outfit, the commoners and merchants in the upper city would think their king was a lowly barbarian. To be honest, I hate this outfit too. V, tugging at her pink dress, regretted leading the charge into the upper city that day. She was now the kingdom's eldest princess, and her attire had to be appropriate. I feel great, said Bayo Bayo, also wearing a little dress, holding a doll in one hand and V's hand in the other, her face beaming with happiness. I think it looks good too, it matches your hair perfectly. At that moment, George walked over from behind. Pink hair paired with a pink dress, combined with the exquisite styling by the top makeup artist in the upper city, instantly transformed the tomboy V into a beautiful and adorable young woman, a stark contrast to her previous appearance. Of course, this was only true if she didn't speak. Once she did, her androgynous voice immediately gave her away. This is absolutely the last time. Tomorrow I'll be the new Zone Guard captain, and I'll never wear this again. V's lips twitched, her face full of disgust for her clothes. Seeing this, Vander smiled and shook his head, then asked George, George, are you sure it's really okay? Don't worry. It's not a problem. George waved his hand, spread his wings, and slowly flew into the air above the lower city. He stretched out his hands and pointed downwards. Clean and refreshed, powerful magic erupted from his body instantly, an invisible force spreading outwards from him in all directions of the lower city. Wherever this force passed, toxic fumes, sewage, garbage, and various chemical residues vanished. The entire filthy and chaotic lower city, under everyone's incredulous gaze, gradually became spotless, transforming into pristine land. I said there should be light here. Then, George landed, pressed his hands to the ground, and a huge magic circle formed. The lower city, which had previously resembled a canyon, began to expand outwards, opening a large gap and allowing bright sunlight to clearly illuminate every corner. The former small town, like a sewer, never seeing sunlight, was now bathed in sunlight, emerging from darkness into light. I said there should be trees here. With a clasp of his hands, the magic circle transformed, and beautiful trees began to sprout from the ground in the lower city. I told you there should be flowers and grass here. Following the trees, beautiful flowers and grasses also began to grow. Done. When George finished, the once dark and dirty lower city had been transformed into paradise. Compared to the upper city, it was no longer a contrast of darkness and light, poverty and wealth. Instead, it was a beautiful natural landscape and a modern, technologically advanced city, each with its own unique characteristics and charm. Who says magic can only destroy? This is truly amazing. Looking at the drastically changed lower city, Vander couldn't help but sigh. For the past few days, he'd been agonizing over how to change the lower city. Although he had become the king of New Zone, unifying the upper and lower cities, realizing his ideal of making the lower city like the upper city was no easy task. First, the environment of the lower city was a major problem. The pollution accumulated over 200 years couldn't be cleaned up in a short time. He had considered relocating the lower city's residents to the upper city, but that was practically unrealistic. Doing so would only incite a mass uprising among the upper city's commoners and merchants. The commoners and most merchants of the upper city didn't care about a change of ruler, provided the new ruler didn't infringe too much on their interests. Otherwise, they would either rebel, or if they couldn't, choose to leave. New Zone, newly established, desperately needed stability. Secondly, many lower city residents weren't used to the pace of life in the upper city and were unwilling to leave. And just as he was racking his brains over this, George learned of his predicament, leading to today's scene. He had wondered what George might do to solve the problem, but he never expected such an incredible solution that would completely transform the lower town. The lower town is now so beautiful that, as long as security is maintained, many people from the upper town would be willing to live and visit there. This way, he wouldn't have to worry so much about the economy. As long as people from both sides maintain regular communication and interaction, within a few years, there would be no longer any distinction between the upper and lower town, and the hostility would disappear. Chapter 539 The Power of Runes. George, it's truly an honor for us in New Zone to have you join. Looking at the dramatically transformed lower city, Vander took George's hand, his face beaming with excitement. George smiled and replied, as a member of New Zone, it's what I should do. This small matter meant little to him now, Stabilizing New Zone quickly and attracting more people to trade there would give him the opportunity to acquire a large number of spellbooks and magical items for research. Professor Heimerdinger, do you still think magic is dangerous? After chatting with Vander for a while, he approached Heimerdinger. His second purpose for doing all this today was to gain the trust of this great inventor. In terms of inventive ability, Professor Heimerdinger, a Yordle, was undoubtedly second to none in the League of Legends world. Winning over Professor Heimerdinger would allow him to complete Hextech more quickly and also help him understand the magic of this world faster. Although Professor Heimerdinger primarily focused on technology, he wasn't entirely ignorant of magic. Yordles were inherently skilled in magic. Perhaps you're right, magic isn't all destruction. Heimerdinger looked at the beautiful lower city and, recalling how George had cured Victor's terminal illness with magic, couldn't help but sigh. Perhaps Jess wasn't wrong. If Hextech is perfected enough, it can indeed help ordinary people live better lives. Alright, I will help them. Vander led a group of ministers to handle the follow-up work, while George and Heimerdinger returned to the academy. At this time, inside the academy, Jess and Victor had completed the initial construction of the Hextech rune device, and only the final step was needed to synthesize it. Boom! When George and Heimerdinger appeared at the academy gate, a burst of energy suddenly erupted from the experimental building. Oh, it seems to have succeeded. George raised an eyebrow, grabbed Heimerdinger, and instantly teleported away from where he stood. These are the runes of this world, quite comprehensive. Arriving at the laboratory, George saw that the Hextech core was surrounded by various mysterious runes containing the fundamental laws of magic. Jess and Victor were being held in mid-air by the power of these runes, as if they were in weightless space. Through studying all the magic books collected in the upper city during this period, he discovered that magic in the League of Legends world is mainly divided into 4 types: astral magic, elemental magic, mental magic, and composite magic. Astral magic, simply put, is the magic of the Dragon King and the Celestials, primarily based on starlight, starfire, and celestial energy. It originated from outer space and flowed to Runeterra, not being native magic. Its power surpasses that of normal magic, making it extremely strong. Elemental magic, such as the true ice magic of Freljord, the primal axioms of Ixtal, and the elemental demigods, are all based on manipulating certain substances. Mental magic, such as the special abilities of the Vastayan, Yordle magic, the spirit realm, the black mist and necromancy of the Shadow Isles, and demonic power, are all related to consciousness, emotions, and the soul. Rune magic is a combination of astral magic and the material elements of Runeterra, containing both material and mental magical principles. Therefore, it is classified as composite magic. Thoroughly studying rune magic is essentially equivalent to understanding the various magical principles of this world. The various runes activated by Hextech now displayed these magical principles in the most direct way. A massive amount of mental energy burst forth from George's eyes, rapidly enveloping the runes, and he quickly absorbed and comprehended a vast amount of magical principles. Simultaneously, his rudimentary little world began to slowly enrich itself through his understanding of these runes. What terrifying power! Who exactly is he? Professor Heimerdinger, sensing the immense mental energy emanating from George, showed a look of horror on his face. Even during the Rune Wars, he had rarely seen anyone possess such terrifying mental power. Still not enough. If I can collect the world runes sometime and examine the magical principles within them, it will probably be of greater help to me. Or perhaps, I should go and see the sun disk that extracted the Dragon King's power and can produce ascended beings. About 10 minutes later, George slowly withdrew his mental energy. This Hextech rune was merely the runic power condensed after Victor's mechanical ascension in the future. It still couldn't compare to the essential world runes of this world. In history, the eruption of that essential world rune's energy cleaved the sky, shattered the void, caused the earth to collapse, and flooded the seas. An entire continent in eastern Valoran was affected and sank into the deep sea, disappearing from the world forever. This is the League of Legends universe. With its immense energy, the world's resilience far surpasses that of ordinary planets. Even if he unleashed his full power in this world, he couldn't possibly sink an entire continent into the sea, demonstrating the terrifying power contained within the world rune. If he could fully comprehend the world rune, not only would his creation speed of small worlds greatly increase, but the small worlds he created would also be far more powerful than normal small worlds. As for the sun disk, it was an artifact created by the Protoss after they controlled Aurelian's soul, extracting his power to help mortals ascend to become ascended, or what mortals call gods, and later, darken. He doesn't yet know the power it contains, but it's definitely no less than that of the world rune. Well done, keep it up. If you encounter any problems, you can discuss them with Professor Heimerdinger. He has already agreed to help protect you in developing Hextech. George encouraged Jess and Victor, gave them a few more instructions, and then left temporarily. He still needed some time to digest and absorb the runic magic he had just acquired. Meanwhile, in Academy City, George, who was in seclusion, received another invitation from Aleister. Perfect timing, it's about time to collect those 103,000 spellbooks. Previously, because Index's mind contained the world's strongest anti-counterfeiting magic system, he couldn't forcibly read those 103,000 spellbooks. So he cooperated with Aleister, helping Aleister in exchange for the magic Aleister taught him about this world. But now, thanks to the efforts of his main body and his other world clones, his strength had increased exponentially, and he even had the rudiments of his own small world. As long as he brought Index into his own small world and used the laws of his own small world to restrict the defense system in Index's mind, he could easily obtain those 103,000 spellbooks. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 540, infinitely close to the level of a single universe. Academy City, District 7, a windowless building. George once again stepped into the special room where the fallen Aleister Crowley was. This guy is stronger than I imagined, George thought to himself as he scanned Aleister with his mental energy. He had always known that Aleister was strong and that he was no match for him, but he had never been able to gauge Aleister's true strength. Until now, his strength had increased exponentially. His human form, due to the gradual completion of the small world's nascent form, was infinitely close to the single universe level, and his dragon form's individual strength was also infinitely close to the single universe level. Only now did he truly see Aleister's hidden true strength. Through his perception, Aleister's strength was not quite at the single universe level, but it was also infinitely close. In other words, their strength was now roughly even, and who would win in a real fight would depend on their individual skills. In this respect, it wasn't that he was arrogant, he believed that Aleister was inferior to him. He had learned a lot of Aleister's techniques from their previous transaction. Of course, Aleister's knowledge of magic wasn't comprehensive, but that didn't matter. He would soon receive 103,000 grimoires from Index, allowing him to learn over 80% of the magic in this world. In other words, he understood most of Aleister's methods, while Aleister only knew the basics. In terms of skill, the magic he had learned from so many worlds far surpassed Aleister's. How is this possible, however, compared to George's calm? Aleister's heart was in turmoil. The moment George's mental energy swept over him, he subconsciously reassessed George's strength. In just a few months, George's strength had actually made him feel threatened. What did this mean? It meant that George's strength was now on par with his. The last time he saw George, the two were not even in the same league. If he truly attacked, he could easily crush George. In his eyes, the only real opponents were the demon gods. But now, he was no longer confident. Perhaps this isn't such a bad thing. On second thought, he felt that this might not be so bad. The two were already in a cooperative relationship. If handled properly, George might be a powerful tool for him to deal with the demon god, just like he had been training the illusion killer. In the blink of an eye, countless calculations flashed through his mind. What brings you here this time? George asked first. Although he now possessed the strength to contend with Aleister, it didn't mean he wanted to turn against him. They were in a cooperative relationship, and he wanted to continue to extract value from Aleister, so everything remained the same. However, compared to being subordinate in the cooperation before, they were now equals. If Aleister wanted to harm him, he wouldn't just resort to verbal threats as before. I need you to help me deal with a disobedient child, and also to go to England, Aleister said with a smile. George didn't hesitate. What's in it for me? What kind of magic do you want to learn? I can teach you anything. Aleister knew that what George wanted most was all kinds of magic. But this time, George shook his head. This time I don't want magic. I want to learn more about the demon god. He could get magic from Index immediately. There was no need to exchange it now. He'd rather use it to exchange for information about the demon god. He didn't know much about the demon god before, only that mages who entered the demon god's realm possessed the power to destroy the universe at will. The reason he wanted to learn about the demon god was that, currently, in this world, apart from the demon god, there seemed to be no other existence that could threaten him. If possible, he also wanted to see if he could capture one to use as a spirit-kin summit. He had never used a spirit-kin summit in this world before. He didn't care for small spirits, he wanted a large one. Although it would take longer to digest, the increase in his strength would be significant enough. Okay, Aleister narrowed his eyes and then agreed. He wanted to use George to deal with the demon god. He would tell George about the demon god sooner or later. Life will inevitably end, apples will inevitably fall from the top, 1 + 1 = 2. These laws of the world that will never change can all be destroyed, reassembled, and created using the magic recorded in the grimoires. 1 + 1 will become 3, apples will inevitably fall from the bottom, and dead lives will inevitably be resurrected. Magicians call those who can do such things demon gods. Aleister slowly revealed the essence of demon gods. Demon gods do not refer to gods of the demon realm, but rather magicians who have fully mastered magic, entered the realm of gods, and can freely distort all the laws of the world, the ultimate form of magicians. Aleister spoke about demon gods for a full hour, and George listened attentively for the entire hour. The information was extremely detailed, even including who the current demon gods were, how they became demon gods, their attitudes towards the world, and the harm they posed. Although Aleister didn't explicitly state it, George sensed a hint. Aleister seemed extremely hostile towards demon gods. Thank you for the information. I'll handle those 2 matters you mentioned. Having obtained the information about the demon god, George also agreed to Aleister's request. Aleister had asked him to do 2 things. First, Kakin Titoku, the second-ranked Esper in Academy City, had betrayed them, and Aleister wanted him to suppress and retrieve him. Second, he needed to go to England, where the right seed of God, the darkest branch of the Roman Catholic Church, seemed to be planning World War III, plotting to seize the power of Imagine Breaker and the 103,000 grimoires. Aleister needed him to protect Kamar-Taj Tuma, ensuring he didn't use any powers other than Imagine Breaker while undergoing training. As for why he needed to protect Kamar-Taj Tuma, Aleister didn't hide it from him, saying he needed Kamar-Taj Tuma's power to fight the demon god. Neither of these tasks was difficult for George. Taking down an Esper was a piece of cake, and protecting Kamar-Taj Tuma was convenient since he also needed to find Index to obtain the power of the 103,000 grimoires. Eye of Detection, teleporting to the skies above Academy City, a blood-red cross instantly appeared in George's eyes. As the cross in his eyes lit up, a gigantic eye also appeared in the sky above the entire city. Found it, with a flash, he vanished from his spot again. The Eye of Detection was the magic of Scarlet Despairine, allowing her to directly detect everything happening in the entire city through the giant eye that appeared in the sky. It was even more convenient than his tracking spells for finding people. Chapter 541 Catching White Wings Barehanded. At the headquarters of the Dark Organization Tools, Mujino Shizuri, the 4th-ranked Esper in Academy City, is being relentlessly suppressed by Kakin Titoku, the 2nd-ranked Esper. Other members are also being attacked by members of Kakin Titoku's organization school. The battle is on the verge of collapse. You mere 4th-ranked Esper dare to challenge me? Today I will utterly destroy you. Kakin Titoku unfurls 6 pairs of white wings behind him, like 6 sharp blades, cutting everything in their path to shreds. Mujino Shizuri frantically dodges the attacks while unleashing a full-force counterattack with white beams capable of melting walls. However, the beams she fires with atomic collapse are always blocked by the white wings just before they hit her opponent, and the white wings remain completely undamaged. How could this be? Mujino Shizuri's face shows terror. She thought that as the 4th-ranked Esper, the gap between her and the 2nd-ranked Esper wouldn't be that big, and she didn't even think she would lose to the 2nd-ranked Esper. After all, her strength was about the same as Misaka Mikado, who was ranked 3rd. But now she realizes that she is completely outmatched. Her opponent's attacks could easily kill her if they touched her, while her attacks couldn't even scratch them. Run! At this moment, her fighting spirit was completely gone. She planned to seize the opportunity to escape first, and then slowly think of a way to take revenge. However, just then, a familiar voice suddenly rang out in the room. Yo, they're fighting quite fiercely. The sudden voice made Kakin Titoku stop attacking, giving her a chance to catch her breath. She looked towards the direction from which the voice came. It's Misaka Mikado. No, it's her, that terrifying clone. At first glance, she thought it was the third-rank Misaka Mikado, but she quickly realized something was wrong through her clothing and demeanor. The person who came was not the real Misaka Mikado, whose strength was comparable to hers, but the clone Misaka 9981, whose strength was beyond the norm and who had even surpassed a #1 ranked accelerator. If it's her, maybe I don't need to run away for now. Mujino Shizuri, who had originally planned to escape through the window, changed her mind and stayed. Misaka Mikado, ranked 3rd, this is none of your business. Get out of here, or I'll take care of you too. Over there, Hangenji Toku mistook George for the Electromaster Misaka Mikado based on his appearance and waved him away rudely. Whether it was Mujino Shizuri, ranked 4th, or Misaka Mikado, ranked 3rd, both of their abilities were countered by his. His ability was to create non-existent matter, matter that didn't exist in this world. Not something not yet discovered or theoretically should exist, but something that truly didn't exist, so it wasn't subject to existing physical laws. Light waves and electron waves, as long as they passed through the tiny gaps in his wide wings, would change their properties, distorting into impossible vectors, acting according to their own laws. Therefore, when Mujino Shizuri and Misaka Mikado's abilities touched his, they were directly distorted and nullified, unable to cause him any harm. Even the guy ranked 1st ahead of him, Accelerator. Although he hadn't fought him, he didn't think he would lose. The only person he feared in this academy city was the mysterious chairman, Aleister Crowley. Therefore, taking advantage of the gap in Academy City's internal defenses due to the deployment of the Drive Armor Force to France to help quell the rebellion, and the subsequent invasion by other forces, he also broke away from the Dark Organization's loyalty to Aleister and led all members of the school to attack the Elementary Particle Engineering Research Institute in District 18. They seized the Ultra-Particle Object Interference Adsorption Manipulator, referred to as tweezers, which could extract intelligence from space loops. He intended to use the tweezers as leverage to obtain direct negotiation rights with the chairman of the board, Aleister Klogaki. Since the Tools organization was interfering, he would deal with them as well, especially Takatsubo Riko, who had tracking abilities. Keeping her around would be troublesome. I've been sent by Aleister to arrest you, George said calmly, looking at the wings made of futuristic matter behind Hangenji Toku with interest. Hangenji Toku burst into laughter upon hearing this. Aleister sent you to arrest me? With you? Ho ha ho ha, it seems he's starting to panic. While mocking him, a white wing suddenly extended from his back, striking towards George, intending to cleave him in two on the spot. He had no mercy for George. However, George's body was covered in a layer of golden light, and he actually caught a wing with a single hand. This is undimensional matter? Looking at it this way, many of my powers can be considered undimensional. George scanned the white wing with his mind and had already reached a conclusion. Undimensional matter, to put it bluntly, is a power outside the normal power system of this world. The power methods he acquired in other worlds are actually undimensional matter in this world. For example, the energy generated by the golden light spell he is currently using. Catch my white wing bare-handed, seeing that George caught his white wing, which could cut through golden stone, with one hand, and did not have the signature lightning ability. Huan Zhendi frowned. This was different from what he knew from the intelligence. You have some skill, but the power I wield is not something that mere mortals like you can compare to. The remaining 5 wings flapped violently, sending a terrifying shockwave hurtling towards George. Little one, if you won't cooperate, then I won't be polite. George released his grip on the white wing, and a black magic circle formed. To him, the teenage Huan Zhendi was just a kid. Thunder God slaying magic. Thunder God's lightning particle cannon, a black lightning bolt, seemingly solid, burst forth from the magic circle, directly shattering the powerful shockwave, and then continued towards Huan Zhendi. Huan Zhendi hadn't expected George's lightning to be so powerful, but his face showed no fear. He simply fused his 6 white wings together, holding them in front of him. His white wings completely countered lightning. Even the most powerful lightning bolts would be distorted and vanished upon striking them. Misaka Mikado, your attack has no effect on me. Huan Zhendi's words were barely halfway through when the black lightning easily pierced through his 6 white wings, striking his body squarely, electrocuting him to the point of losing control of his bladder and bowels. Take him to the guards, someone will receive him. Seeing the severely injured and unconscious Hangenji Toku, George spoke to Mujino Shizuri, who was swallowing hard, before teleporting away. Technological lightning couldn't harm Hagame Titoku, but he was using magical lightning, a magical lightning from another world, a special lightning specifically designed to deal with gods. The energy intensity was also on a completely different level. Chapter 542 Time Stop. Wait a moment, after dealing with Hagame Titoku, George teleported to the sky above Academy City's largest and most famous luxurious public bath. Kamar-Taj and Index hadn't gone to England yet. He'd found them while using his detective eye to search for Hagame Titoku. However, Index was currently bathing in the public bath below, filled with girls from Academy City, so he couldn't just go in. Although his clone in this world also had a female body, and it would be normal for him to go in, his heart wasn't that of a girl, and he definitely wouldn't do something like going into a women's bathhouse. Anyway, he wasn't in a hurry. Amakasa-style cross-cult magicians, they seemed to be here to protect Kamar-Taj as well. Glancing down, he saw many Amakasa-style magicians scattered around the bath. According to Leicester, the right seed of God needed Index's 103,000 grimoires and Imagine Breaker, so they would be sending the rear water into Academy City to steal them soon. The right seed of God, the most powerful dark force of the Roman Catholic Church, consists of only 4 members, each inheriting the power of the 4 archangels and capable of using powerful angelic spells. They are also the ultimate weapon of the Roman Catholic Church. They're out. George's mental energy enveloped the entire large bath, and he saw Index, Misaka Mikado, and a large-breasted female mage, Amakasa style, finally finish their bath and emerge from the tub. The 3 dried themselves, changed their clothes, and went to the bathhouse's buffet area. The large-breasted female mage simply grabbed a drink and went out to find Kamar-Taj, who was waiting outside, for a stroll. Misaka Mikado also ate a little something and returned to her dormitory. Only Index, with her small body seemingly hiding a gluttonous stomach, was devouring her food with great relish. Time stop. Teleporting into the buffet area, George activated time magic, temporarily halting time within the restaurant's boundaries, and arrived in front of Index. Using this magic here feels a bit strange. George looked around at the girls, all fresh from their showers and radiating youthful energy. His time magic had frozen him in place, and memories of his past life flashed through his mind. However, he quickly dismissed these memories. Now wasn't the time to dwell on them. He placed his hand on Index's head, activating his dual-wielding blue hand, telekinesis, Soul Reaper's spell, and magic dispel spell. With a combined power of various mental and spiritual spells, the automatic book of magic, touted as the strongest defensive magic of the Anglican Church, was instantly dismantled in Index's mind. All 103,000 grimoires were copied into George's mind in one go. The vast amount of magical knowledge and theory made George's lips curl into a smile. Another giant leap closer to the single universe level. Once he fully absorbed the knowledge from these 103,000 grimoires, not only would his magical level improve significantly, and his individual strength increase, but his small world would also become more complete thanks to this foundation of magical knowledge. Release. Having obtained the magical knowledge he desired, George quietly deactivated the time stop, restoring the normal flow of time within the restaurant. However, just as he was about to leave to slowly absorb the knowledge from the 103,000 grimoires, he suddenly raised an eyebrow. They really came. He sensed a powerful force appearing outside the bathhouse. The Amakasa-style mages guarding the bathhouse were almost powerless against it and were easily subdued. However, the newcomer was quite measured, not killing anyone. This isn't going to work. I might as well just uproot all these so-called right seats of God. After thinking for a moment, George made a decision. If he followed Leicester's advice, he would have to stay by Kamar-Taj's side indefinitely. What if this guy didn't go to England for several months? Wouldn't he have to stay for several months? That would be too much of a waste of time. It would be better if he just eliminated all 4 of the right seats of God, so Kamar-Taj wouldn't have to go to England, and he could focus on absorbing the knowledge from the 103,000 grimoires. He had heard a rumor in the memories of the magician he had previously searched. If someone could fully comprehend the knowledge in the 103,000 magic books, they would have the chance to instantly become a demon god using that magical knowledge. Although it was just a rumor, it probably wasn't entirely unfounded. Coincidentally, he was also somewhat interested in the angelic spells that the Roman Catholic Church had passed down for so many years, so he could study them as well. On the bridge across the river in the 22nd School District of Academy City, Kamar-Taj was taking a walk with Itsuka, unaware that the ordinary people around them had been driven away by magic. "If Your Holiness the Pope were here, we wouldn't have to worry about attacks," Itsuka said regretfully, carrying a package containing her magical weapons. Kamar-Taj, on the other hand, put his hands behind his head. "Is Kanzaki really that powerful? Of course, she's a saint. There aren't 20 saints in the whole world. Any enemy would be defeated by Her Holiness the Pope in one move." Speaking of the Amakasa-style female Pope Kanzaki, Itsuka's face was full of admiration. Kamar-Taj nodded upon hearing this. He hadn't expected the girl with the sword to be so powerful. "Any enemy? That's not necessarily true, at least not including me." Just then, a burly man with his hands in his pockets appeared on the bridge. The man threw a uniquely designed necklace on the ground, saying, "The culprit who brought chaos to the world, leave your right hand, or I'll rid the world of this menace today. This is the acting Pope's necklace." Seeing the necklace on the ground, Itsuki immediately recognized it as belonging to the Amakasa-style acting Pope, Kinmiya Seiji. This meant that all the Amakasa-style mages who had been guarding and protecting them were wiped out. She swiftly drew her spirit weapon, the naval ship's gun, from her backpack. Before she could even assume a fighting stance, she was struck heavily in the back and sent flying. It was the man who had attacked her from behind with incredible speed. Kamar-Taj rushed forward to help the bloodied Itsuki, but he had barely taken a step when he too was sent flying without a chance to retaliate. The man was too fast. He didn't even have the chance to use his right hand to deflect the attack. Despite his severe injuries, Itsuki managed to get up and attack, but he couldn't even touch the man's clothes. The man frowned as he looked at Itsuki, who was protecting Tuma, and said, "Consider this a warning. I'll give you 1 day to hand over your arms, or next time I'll crush you both." Right, seed of God, water of the rear, trespassing in Academy City seems rather inappropriate. Just as the man was about to leap away from the bridge, a hand landed on his shoulder, pulling him back down. Chapter 543. This is a master. Such speed, how Fang Zhishu's pupils contracted. This is a master. Although he hadn't exerted much force and was relatively relaxed, that didn't mean just anyone could push him back. As someone who possessed both the power of the Son of God, Gabriel, and the power of a saint, and had perfectly fused the two powers, capable of achieving more than the sum of its parts, his physical strength alone was already terrifying, even without magic. "Little girl, I've come for justice. You'd better not obstruct my justice." Reaching out, he grabbed the hand that was pressing down on him and slowly removed it. Justice isn't something you can just say casually. What you consider justice might not be justice in other people's eyes. George raised an eyebrow. How Fang Zhishu's physical strength was actually superior to his own. "Your name is Wu, right? Take Kamar-Taj and get him treated." "Okay, I understand." Wu carried the heavily injured Kamar-Taj and ran towards the outside of the bridge. Seeing this, Rear Water didn't stop him. He had originally planned to give Tuma a day to think things over and didn't intend to kill him immediately. "According to the information I obtained, your superpowers should be electricity and electromagnetism, but it seems that the information is inaccurate. Academy City, representing science, and the various churches, representing magic, were originally hostile. The Roman Catholic Church had also collected a lot of information about Academy City. Top-tier superpowered individuals like Misaka Mikado were within the scope of key intelligence. Since he came to Academy City, he would naturally read through the information on those superpowered individuals. After reading it, he felt that apart from Accelerator, who was ranked number 1, no one else posed any threat. Especially someone like Misaka Mikado, who relied on ranged attacks and was physically weak. "I'm not interested in your hidden information, nor am I interested in you. I'm only steadfast in my faith, so I'll ask you one more time, are you going to interfere? You're not interested in me, but I'm quite interested in you. You don't just have angelic power, do you?" George stroked his chin and looked Rear Water up and down. He sensed two immense powers within the water behind him. One was likely angelic power, while the other resembled the power of a saint described in magic books. The angelic power of the right seed of God was essentially the result of eliminating original sin through a special technique, thus inheriting the powers of the four archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. They could wield incredibly powerful angelic techniques, albeit incomplete, capable of easily destroying a city. However, once possessing angelic power, Normal magic could no longer be used. As for saints, as previously mentioned, they were magicians who, like Jesus, received the power of a divine child. Not only were their physical bodies extremely strong, but their magic was also far more powerful than that of ordinary magicians. Since you're determined to interfere, then I have no choice but to punish you. The water behind him didn't answer George's question but instead drew his spiritual weapon from his shadow, a 5-meter-long, extravagantly designed lance. Without hesitation, the 1,000-pound lance, as heavy as straw in his hands, thrust out at a speed imperceptible to the naked eye. However, his terrifying thrust missed its mark. George had already teleported away. In George's view, if he used the Golden Light spell and various other spells to enhance his physical strength, it wouldn't be weaker than Hao Fang Zhi Shui's, so there was no need. He had so many powerful spells, why fight Hao Fang Zhi Shui in close combat? He usually only used close combat to deal with very weak opponents, because he was certain he wouldn't lose. But against someone like Hao Fang Zhi Shui, whose physical body was even stronger than his, there was no need for close combat. Unless he planned to transform into a dragon, in which case his physical strength would absolutely crush Hao Fang Zhi Shui, there was no need for that. Teleportation, it seems you have several superpowers. Hao Fang Zhi Shui was somewhat surprised, but didn't pay much attention. His figure flashed as he continued to thrust at George. Such a short distance teleportation might not be as fast as George's. Teleportation was fast, but the body would have an adaptation period after teleporting, and the reflexes would be somewhat slow. That momentary pause was enough for him to finish off the enemy. Disarm you, George chanted the incantation, and a blue light radiated outwards from him, quickly enveloping the water behind him. The instant the blue light covered the water, the spirit lance in the water's hand flew out of its grasp uncontrollably. It spun in the air before landing in George's hand. He had just used an upgraded area of effect disarming spell. Any enemy covered by the light would have their weapons forcibly removed. No, this is magic. How can you know magic? The water's expression changed drastically as George disarmed the lance. What surprised him wasn't the ability to forcibly remove weapons, but the fact that George had used magic. Superpowers and magic cannot coexist. This is an ironclad rule known to everyone. It is precisely because of this rule that Academy City and the magic world can barely maintain a peaceful situation. Otherwise, war would inevitably break out between them to seize each other's power. Misaka Mikado, as one of the strongest espers, can use magic. Does this mean Academy City has found a way for espers to learn magic? Why do I know magic? Because I'm a magician. George opened his mouth, and terrifying tricolored flames erupted. You do know magic? It seems I'll have to take you back to the church. Seeing this, the water behind him also unleashed his true power. Angelic spell, endless waters. With a wave of his hands, he summoned all the water within a 2-kilometer radius, forming a vast water centered on him. Archangel Gabriel's nature is water, so his limit is to control all the water within a 2-kilometer radius. Under his angelic power, this water is no longer ordinary water. Possessing magical properties, it can change into various forms for attack and defense. Within this endless waters, no one can defeat him. The water's defense is quite good, seeing that his tricolored flames, after burning for a while, hadn't burned through the waters. George's face showed surprise. The tricolored flames were indeed powerful. Even the water within the waters, imbued with angelic power, couldn't withstand them and was largely evaporated. However, the water in that area was too vast, and the evaporated water vapor was further controlled by the water behind it, as well as replenished from nearby sources. Therefore, even after the 3-colored flames' attack was exhausted, the water area remained unchanged. Chapter 544, A Battle of Wits. Why is her fire magic so powerful? Is she also a saint? The water behind the endless watercourse that had blocked the tricolored flames was also quite shocked. Normally, the power of magic of the same attribute depends mostly on quantity, like two mages using fire magic. The winner is simply whose fire magic is bigger and more powerful. Your fist-sized fireball can't beat my watermelon-sized fireball. Only saints are exceptions, because their special abilities make their magic much stronger than normal magic. Even with the same fire magic, or even the same spell with the same mana output, a saint's fire magic is far more powerful than a normal mage's. Both are fist-sized fireballs, but yours isn't as powerful as a saint's. And that's the feeling he got from the opponent's fire magic just now. In terms of quantity, his endless watercourse could easily extinguish the fire magic that had just been spewed at him, not to mention that she was a saint, and the water in her endless watercourse was stronger than ordinary water. But in fact, if he hadn't reacted quickly enough, his endless watercourse would have almost been pierced through. What does this mean? This meant that the opponent's magical power, in the same quantity, far surpassed his own. That's why he guessed the opponent was also a saint. The opponent's powerful physical body earlier might have been a manifestation of sainthood. However, even if the opponent was a saint, their magical power shouldn't be stronger than his. Because he was also a saint, a composite of saint and saint, his magical power was twice that of an ordinary saint. No matter what you are, disappear today. Hao Fang's issue unleashed the full power of his angelic and saintly abilities, and the vast waters within a 2-kilometer radius around him began to rapidly transform. 20-meter-long water guns, 30-meter-long ice swords, and 40-meter-long giant water hammers instantly materialized around Hao Fang's issue as the center. What a spectacle! I'll show off too. Seeing the sky filled with magical weapons, George pointed towards the bridge below. Rise. With his abilities fully activated, the 800-meter-long bridge spanning the Academy City's river roared up and landed before George. In terms of ability, he is now on par with Lao Wan, and at his peak, he can lift a bridge over 1,000 meters long. Ha! Do you think mere ordinary metal can withstand my magically created weapons? Although the water behind was surprised that George could manipulate the entire bridge, he was not panicked. His magical weapons, generated by his endless waters, were enhanced by the power of angels and saints, far surpassing ordinary metals. If the opponent tried to use the bridge as a shield, the result would only be that he would be pierced through by his countless magical weapons. Defend? No, I prefer to attack. George's lips curled up, and he placed his hand on the bridge. Mimetic transformation, dragon transformation, the mimicry magic was activated, and the 800-meter-long metal bridge instantly transformed into a 5-clawed metal dragon over 1,000 meters long. Divine refinement, the weapon refining technique followed the mimicry magic, endowing the 5-clawed metal dragon with magical weapon attributes. Its eyes could fire energy lasers, its mouth could spew 3-colored flames, its 5 claws were filled with the power of Zheng metal that could tear everything apart. And its body possessed extremely strong defense. There's actually such magic. Seeing George transform a bridge into a metal dragon in just a few seconds, the water behind him was once again shocked. He was familiar with various systems of magic, but this was the first time he had seen something like this. Knowing that he couldn't delay any longer, he waved his hands, and countless magical weapons rained down on George. George also waved his hand. Attack him! The 1,000-meter-long 5-clawed metal dragon let out a majestic roar and charged towards the weapons. Below, where the two sides were fighting, countless students and service personnel living in Academy City opened their windows to watch the battle in the sky, and couldn't help but gape. Fortunately, at this moment, the broadcasts in various districts of Academy City also sounded at the same time. Students, don't worry, this is the latest virtual imaging technology developed by the laboratory, and it is currently being demonstrated. Can't this guy be a little more discreet? In a windowless building, Aleister couldn't help but twitch his lips. The water behind was indeed powerful, even ranking among the top humans globally, excluding demons. However, he knew that with George's strength, a full-force attack would be enough to defeat him in a few moves, making such a commotion unnecessary. How could this be? In the sky, the 5-clawed metal dragon's eyes shone with golden light, its mouth spewed flames, its claws tore through all weapons, and its body lashed out in a flurry. This forced the water behind to constantly replenish its magical weaponry to barely maintain its strength. Meanwhile, George watched leisurely, analyzing the 5-clawed metal dragon's performance to analyze the flaws in his own divine crafting. Based on his understanding, the most powerful being in this world was a demon. His current strength was no less than that of an ordinary demon, and demons were weakened when entering the real world. Therefore, in this world, he no longer needed to be cautious or deliberately hide his strength. As for whether exposing his magic would cause trouble for Aleister, that was none of his concern. He and Aleister were merely partners. He had been more cautious before because he was weaker than Aleister, but now there was no need to care so much about Aleister's opinion. Besides, with Aleister's strength, if he couldn't even handle this follow-up, he would be utterly useless. It was rare to encounter a mage of decent strength, a perfect opportunity to test the weapon forging abilities he had gained from his clones in other worlds. He could also take the opportunity to see just how much potential the Saint and Mother's enhancements truly had. Is it not working? Half an hour later, seeing that the magical weapons that Rearwater was using to create were dwindling, George knew that the other's power was almost exhausted. Such high-intensity use of magic required more mana than most people. Endless water, explode. Rearwater clearly sensed something was wrong, knowing that if this continued, he would surely lose. So he directly enveloped the entire 5-clawed metal dragon in George with endless water, channeling all his magic power to forcefully detonate it. A violent explosion resounded over Academy City, like the detonation of a small nuclear bomb, the blinding light instantly turning Academy City into daylight. This is the first time someone has pushed me to this point. After the explosion, Hao Fang's issue lay on a small cloud of water, panting heavily. That one move had almost exhausted all his strength. I need to find a place to rest quickly, tell the church about the situation here, and come back to take that kid's right hand when I've recovered. He was at his weakest now, and if he encountered other superpowered individuals in Academy City, even if they were far weaker than the one he just encountered, he would still be in great danger. Chapter 545 The Collapse of the Rearwater. However, just as Rearwater was about to leave, he looked up and his pupils contracted. He saw that the guy opposite him was actually enveloped in an energy shield and hadn't been killed by the explosion. Fortunately, the powerful 5-clawed metal dragon had been blasted into countless metal fragments, which were floating nearby. There's still a chance. Taking a deep breath, he clenched his fists, his muscles bulging, and Rearwater assumed an offensive stance. Although his magic power was running low, his physical strength remained, making him a top-tier expert. Crucially, in the initial probing, his physical strength was clearly superior to his opponent's. The opponent must have expended a lot of magic power to create that 5-clawed metal dragon, and with the added impact of withstanding his final explosion, he believed they couldn't create a second one. Restored to its original state, George waved his hand at the surrounding metal fragments, activating a restoration spell. Time reversed, and the 5-clawed metal dragon reappeared beside him, completely unharmed. Repair spells are a category of time magic, and he's now quite proficient in time magic, with repair spells capable of repairing anything. Therefore, repairing the broken magical artifact, the 5-clawed metal dragon, is a piece of cake. In fact, he could easily gather the metal fragments back together and reforge the 5-clawed metal dragon. However, repair spells are still more convenient. This is the advantage of having many methods. The same problem can be easily solved in many different ways. If it weren't for testing his newly learned weapon forging technique, he could instantly kill someone of Hao Fang's issues level without transforming into a dragon or using a small world. For example, he could use time magic to stop time and easily kill the opponent when they couldn't resist. Or he could use a fairy's law to punish enemies weaker than him on the spot. Or he could unleash the full power of fairy radiance to forcefully annihilate them, and so on. How could this be? Seeing the 5-clawed metal dragon, which he had killed with all his magic power, resurrected, Hao Fang's issue was almost speechless with shock. However, as a knight, he wouldn't give up so easily. With a roar, he charged forward and engaged the 5-clawed metal dragon in hand-to-hand combat. This guy is really stubborn. George couldn't help but sigh as he watched Hao Fang's issue, who was quickly covered in blood from fighting the 5-clawed metal dragon. If it were him, he would definitely choose to run away immediately if he couldn't win, and come back later when he could, or go back and call his friends to gang up on him. However, his physical body is indeed strong. I can study it properly when I have time. After a fierce battle, Hao Fang's issue actually managed to shatter the 5-clawed metal dragon again with his physical strength, but he himself was so badly injured that he could hardly stand. Restored to its original state, George waved his hand again, and the 5-clawed metal dragon was restored once more. Fuck, Hao Fang's issue cursed on the spot and collapsed unconscious. His endurance is really poor. George smiled and waved his hand, taking the unconscious Hao Fang's issue into his own little world. He planned to study the 103,000 grimoires before extracting the angelic formulas and saintly worship to see if he could enhance his physical body. Restored to its original state, with another wave of his hand, the 5-clawed metal dragon flew back to the center of the river, transforming back into the original bridge. Whether it was restored to a metal dragon or a bridge depended mainly on his control of time when casting the spell. Adjusting time forward a bit would naturally revert it to a bridge. Teleporting back to his secluded room, he didn't immediately go to the Roman Catholic Church to cause trouble for the other members of the right seed of God. Instead, he began reading the memories of the rear water. Aleister's information wasn't comprehensive. To fully understand the right seed of God, he needed to search the soul of the rear water. The leader of the right seed of God wasn't the rear water, but the right fire. Therefore, it was highly likely that the right fire was stronger than the rear water. Even stronger than the dual saint physique of rear water, he had to consider whether the other party was on the same level as Aleister. To be cautious, he should examine rear water's memories before making any further plans. This guy has certainly had a lot of experience. Soon, George finished reading rear water's memories and learned the true reason why our right fire wanted 103,000 grimoires and imagine breaker. Rear water wasn't originally a member of the Roman Catholic Church. He was a royal knight of England, but abandoned his knighthood to save his beloved third princess, wandering the world as a mercenary before finally joining the right seed of God. His true purpose in joining the right seed of God was to protect England from the outside. As for right fire, his strength was indeed considerably greater than rear water's. Besides inheriting the fire attribute power of Archangel Michael, he also possessed the divine right from Christian mythology. If he could fully utilize the power of the divine right, he could easily shatter planets. Aleister came to Academy City to help Flame of the Right collect Imagine Breaker and 103,000 grimoires because Flame of the Right said that possessing these two items would allow him to truly unleash the power of divine right. Flame of the Right's ideal was to rectify the world's inequalities and prevent tragedies caused by the accidental overlap of events. He wanted world peace and happiness for all. If you want world peace and happiness for everyone, then why start a third world war? Aleister's statement differed from Flame of the Right's account to Aleister. Either Aleister was lying, or Flame of the Right was lying. He leaned towards the latter, because he knew Aleister's strength and wouldn't lie about such a trivial matter. After all, it would be easily exposed. Aleister was clearly a stubborn knight. It was normal for him to be deceived. I should go myself and see what kind of power this so-called divine right really is. Based on Aleister's memories, he could already determine that Flame of the Right's strength was no match for him, even in its perfect form. The ability to shatter planets seemed unremarkable. It's not like he's shattering the universe. Besides, he didn't grant Right Flame the 103,000 grimoires and Imagine Breaker, so Right Flame can't unleash the full power of the right of God. With a flash, he teleported directly to the headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church, St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. Interesting, the church itself is fighting first, sweeping his mind across the entire basilica. George's face showed surprise. He saw Right Flame, the leader of the right seed of God, fighting the Pope, seemingly intending to kill him and seize supreme power in the Roman Catholic Church. It was a dog-eat-dog situation. He didn't go down to interfere, but instead watched the show from above. Looks like this old Pope has some skills. Chapter 546 Believe in me, I am God. The water of the rear has been captured. What methods did Academy City use? The Pope, holding the intelligence report from his subordinate, looked puzzled. In his view, given the water of the rear's strength, even if the mission was exposed and they were surrounded by Academy City's espers, they could at least escape unscathed. Being captured and disappearing was something he never expected. Academy City was indeed a formidable force, having developed so many powerful espers based on the primal stones. But in reality, he didn't take them particularly seriously. On the surface, the major churches of the magical world and Academy City of the scientific world seemed evenly matched, but in reality, there was a significant gap between them. The reason for this seemingly even match was that the major churches of the magical world were not of one mind. They were engaged in open and covert struggles, each wanting to bring the world into their own church territory. At least, that's what the popes of the major churches thought. This only shows that those espers in Academy City aren't entirely without progress. At this moment, a man in a red suit, hands in his pockets, emerged from the shadows. The Pope's expression changed slightly upon seeing the newcomer. Right Fire, you've been secretly causing trouble for so long. What exactly are you trying to achieve? What am I trying to achieve? World peace, of course, and happiness for everyone. My first plan is to conquer Britain. Almost all of Europe, except for Britain, is already under our control. Inform the other nations to strike Britain from the ground. Right Fire tossed his red hair, his tone extremely arrogant. The Pope frowned. What you're doing seems unlikely to have any impact on Academy City. Right, Academy City? You mean those superpowered individuals? I've never taken them seriously. My true goal is to start World War III, Right Fire replied without hesitation. The Pope's pupils constricted immediately. Are you insane? Are you still a Christian? What do you think, you old fool? Right Fire's lips curled into a smile, revealing his true intentions to the Pope without any reservations. Because after today, the power of the Roman Catholic Church would be completely in his hands. Next, he would unite with the Russian Orthodox Church to launch World War II, seize the automatic scripture control astral armor held by the British royal family, and use it to control Index and obtain 103,000 grimoires. Afterward, he could launch the Bethlehem Plan, completely unleashing the power of the divine right and achieving his ideal. You bastard, do you think I'll let you do as you please? The Pope roared, tearing off the top-tier astral armor cross from his neck and beginning to cast a spell. As the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, he could channel the power of 2 billion Roman believers over 2,000 years, unleashing magic beyond the ordinary to seal enemies. Tell the 1st to the 12th apostles that faith in the Lord is inexhaustible. That which should be abundant is power, and I am the one who correctly understands its meaning. May this power defeat the enemy. With the Pope's chant, the immense power of faith transformed into golden light, directly sealing the fire on the right in front of him into the river of time. From this moment forward, you will spend 40 years in solitude, reflecting upon your actions. It is you who should reflect, the right flame, whose time was sealed by golden light, sneered, and a gigantic claw, blazing with flames and resembling a demon, suddenly sprouted from its back. With a gentle swipe of the claw, the power of faith sealing him instantly collapsed. Die, old man. The red claw rose, revealing a nearly 40-kilometer-long, orange-red phantom sword, which slashed fiercely towards the Pope. The Pope's strength was immense. Even with a divine right, victory would be difficult. However, this strike wasn't just aimed at the Pope, but at the entire Vatican. If the Pope dodged, he would surely escape, resulting in the Vatican being cleaved in two, and countless believers dying by his sword. However, based on his understanding of the Pope, even if the Pope died, he probably wouldn't harm the Vatican. Therefore, the Pope would definitely take the blow head-on. And if he did, he would be severely injured, posing no further threat. Boom! The orange greatsword was blocked by the cross. The Pope coughed up blood and knelt on the ground, the remaining shockwave causing the entire cathedral to collapse. As expected, after the dust settled, Right Fire withdrew his third hand, a smug smile spreading across his face. You're really kind, old man. True peace comes at a price, and you're not even willing to pay that price. How can you lead the church? You should step down. He didn't finish him off. With the Pope's current injuries, once he recovered, his plan would have been completed long ago. The Pope was an obstacle to his plan, but he was a decent person, and he wouldn't really kill him unless absolutely necessary. Alright, my plan can finally begin. Your plan probably can't begin. Seeing the battle between the two and George, who had been observing from a concealed position, also landed. Now his invisibility magic was no longer as easy to detect as before. Combining the illusion charm from Harry Potter, the assassination magic of Jack the Shield of the 12, and various Taoist techniques for concealing one's aura, the effect of his invisibility magic was now imperceptible to anyone whose strength far surpassed his. So neither Right Flame nor the Pope noticed him watching from the air. Who are you? Right Flame raised an eyebrow as he saw George descending from the sky. Who am I? George's eyes darted around as he smiled. Believe me, I am God. At this moment, he wasn't looking like Misaka Mikado, but rather in his Marvel-like form, created using shape-shifting magic. Why change his appearance? It wasn't because he feared retaliation from the Roman Catholic Church. After attacking their stronghold, what was there to fear? It was mainly for the sake of the real Misaka Mikado. His body in this world was a clone of Misaka Mikado. The two looked exactly alike. If the followers and believers of the Roman Catholic Church thought the attacker of their stronghold was the superpowered Misaka Mikado, it wouldn't be good if they sought revenge. I think you're courting death. Right Flame stretched out his hand, and a raging inferno shot directly at George. George opened his mouth and instantly swallowed all the flames. Angelic power alone is useless. It can't withstand one of my attacks. You'd better bring out your braised chicken feet again. That thing should hold out a little longer. Looks like you came prepared. Who sent you? The Anglican Church. Right Flame's expression turned serious, and a third hand reached out from behind him again. The current situation was beyond his expectations. The newcomer seemed to know something about him. And the fact that they dared to come out like this after he had just defeated the Pope showed they had some confidence in their strength. I told you, I am God. Don't you believe me? George raised his hand, and a huge white magic circle rose above his head. I said, let there be light. A pillar of light, condensed from the power of the sun, moon, and stars, descended from the sky, crashing down on Right Flame. He was now casting a super annihilation spell, Fairy Radiance. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 547 Heavenly Punishment Technique. Heretics, daring to blaspheme God, you're courting death. Seeing the pillar of light descending from the sky, Right Flame's expression changed again. His third hand reappeared, gripping a 40-kilometer-long orange-red sword, and he thrust it forward. The orange-red sword phantom collided with a pillar of light, and within seconds, cracks appeared, the sword rapidly collapsing from tip to hilt. How is this possible? Even if his divine right couldn't unleash its full power, it was still beyond the resistance of ordinary people. The old Pope, capable of mobilizing the power of 2 billion faiths, was severely injured and on the verge of death after just receiving this attack, yet now it was broken by the opponent's unknown magic. I never thought this bastard would have such a day. In the shadows of the shattered church, Forward Wind, dressed in a yellow nun's habit and with a tongue ring adorned with a cross, was both shocked and somewhat gloating upon seeing Right Flame's orange sword shatter. Although she was also a member of the Right Seed of God and deeply hated the science faction, especially Academy City, she did not agree with the Right Flame's ideology, nor did she obey his orders. However, she was indeed no match for Right Flame, and secretly rejoiced at seeing him suffer a defeat. She just hadn't expected that there would be a mage in this world who could directly confront and suppress Right Flame. Wind ahead, go help. The heavily injured old Pope, sitting in the shadows, coughed up blood and addressed Wind ahead. Despite being severely injured by Right Flame, despite disagreeing with Right Flame's actions, and despite Right Flame's attempt to seize power from the Roman Catholic Church, Right Flame was still a member of the Right Seed of God within the Roman Catholic Church and had not betrayed the faith. The identity of this unidentified heretic was unknown. If something happened to Right Flame, and he was now severely injured, the Roman Catholic Church might be destroyed by this intruding heretic today. Old man, don't order me around. Hearing the Pope's words, Forward Wind frowned. Her life motto was to never obey anyone's orders, not even the Pope. This isn't an order, it's a request. For the sake of the entire church, the Pope understood Forward Wind's personality well and explained gently. Forward Wind pondered for a moment, then raised her chin. All right, since it's for the sake of the entire church, I'll reluctantly help this bastard. She said this, but in her heart, she had already decided that after helping Right Flame defeat the heretic, she would take advantage of Right Flame's weakness and finish him off as well. I'll take it. The orange longsword shattered, and the Holy Right immediately spread its fingers to block it. After all, it was the right hand from the Christian mythology, possessing various abilities such as breaking time, space, and seals. After a struggle, it actually caught George's full-force super magic in human form. Then I'll add some more fuel to the fire. George wanted to test the limits of that third hand, maintaining the fairy's radiance while waving his hand to light up a second magic circle. God's Star Collapse, the strongest magic of the Empire's twin pillars, Irene, a super powerful spell created by combining the highest level of celestial magic and the highest level of additional magic. It can summon a meteorite to fall from the sky and crush an opponent. If one's strength is sufficient, pulling the moon down from the sky and destroying the world is not impossible. George, of course, couldn't go that far. He merely summoned a meteorite a few kilometers in diameter. But even so, it became the last straw that broke the camel's back. Right Flame, whose resistance against the fairy's brilliance had reached its limit, was directly struck by the falling meteorite, coughing up blood and kneeling on the ground, its third hand exhausted and retracting into its body. However, just as George was about to absorb Right Flame into his own world for later study, a spirit-armored hammer appeared behind his head. Die, heretic, looks like I finally couldn't resist making a move. He wasn't surprised at all by this sneak attack from behind. With his mental power, he had already detected the heavily injured Pope and the approaching Wind from the front. HMPH. George quickly turned his head and exhaled a breath of air. The wind in front's body froze in midair, its soul blasted out. However, at the same moment the wind in front was struck, its own consciousness began to blur. The effect of this heavenly punishment technique is so strong, even I almost fell for it. The main world and the other world clones simultaneously transferred their souls into this body, instantly boosting his mental power and forcibly dispelling the opponent's magical effects. From the memories of water in the back, he knew that besides the angelic technique for controlling wind, the wind in front also possessed the heavenly punishment technique, which was impossible to defend against. This heavenly punishment technique was extremely powerful, but it had a drawback: it couldn't be activated voluntarily. It required sensing malice to activate, and once activated, it forcibly stripped the opponent of their consciousness until the wind in front actively deactivated it. He originally thought that with his current mental strength, he should be able to withstand it, but he hadn't expected to almost fall victim to it. It could only be said that this heavenly punishment technique was indeed unique and worth studying. You're actually alright, Forward Wind, whose soul had been blasted out of her body and forcibly pulled back by an angelic spell, watched as George's eyes rolled back and he instantly regained consciousness, a look of disbelief on her face. This was the first time her heavenly punishment spell had been neutralized by someone using sheer mental strength. Just how terrifying was this guy's mental power? Her heavenly punishment spells had failed before, but usually due to special circumstances. For example, the boy in Academy City with Imagine Breaker who could nullify any magic, and Right Flame's third hand that could break special effects. To withstand it head-on, even the previous Forward Winds had never encountered this situation. Key body source flow, white light flashed in his eyes, and George was enveloped in white ki. He reached out and lightning fast grabbed Forward Wind's neck, pulling him into his arms. Forward Wind's heavenly punishment spell instantly failed. Key body source flow also possessed the same ability as Divine Spirit, capable of breaking any spell. This way, his attacks on Forward Wind would no longer trigger the heavenly punishment spell. "Sleep peacefully, little one," a requiem whispered in Forward Wind's ear, and Forward Wind closed its eyes and drifted off to sleep. "It's a pity we're missing the left side, otherwise we'd have a complete set." Tossing Forward Wind into his own little world, George sighed regretfully. He already possessed 3 of the right seats of God, allowing him to research the angelic and special spells of those 3 individuals. The left side, however, had been wiped out by the rear water for harming innocent people. "It's alright, the old Pope is still here." George stroked his chin, turning his head with a mischievous glint in his eyes to look at the Pope's terrified face. Chapter 548 Forcibly Detaining the Angel. "Heretic, what are you doing?" Seeing George stride towards him, the old Pope raised the spiritual cross on his chest, mustering his last strength to retaliate. However, before he could move, George pressed his head down and began a soul search. After the soul search, George instantly vanished from the spot. He hadn't killed the old Pope. The right seed of God had already been stored in his small world. If the old Pope were killed, the Roman Catholic Church would be in chaos. One move could have far-reaching consequences, potentially throwing the entire magical world into turmoil, ultimately leading to global chaos. Although global chaos wouldn't affect him, it would ultimately harm innocent ordinary people. He didn't leave the Vatican immediately but first searched the souls of the Right Flame and the Forward Wind, obtaining all their memories, and then combined them with the Pope's memories. He copied all the magical tomes in the Vatican that were useful to him. Most of the 103,000 grimoires recorded by Index came from the Puritan collection. Some of the Roman Catholic Church's hidden magic wasn't recorded, like the magic used by the Pope and the angelic incantations of the right seed of God. Since he was already here, and had already taken down the high-ranking members of the Roman Catholic Church, it would be a waste not to copy all the grimoires here as well. After plundering all the valuable grimoires from the Roman Catholic Church, he didn't return to Academy City, but instead went to the Russian Orthodox Church. However, he wasn't there to plunder grimoires, but to find a battle nun named Sasha Klozev. From Right Flame memories, he knew that this battle nun named Sasha Klozev possessed the special constitution of an angelic medium. This meant that through a special ritual, Sasha Klozev could summon archangels from the upper realm. Angels are beings between gods and humans, possessing powerful souls and the strength to destroy the world. Right Flame's plan was to start World War III, and then use Sasha Klozev to summon archangels to assist him in completing his plan. His purpose in seeking out Sasha Klozev was the same: he needed to use her to summon archangels. But he didn't want the archangel to assist him in battle. Instead, He wanted to use the spirit binding technique to forcibly bind an angel, then absorb its spirit to increase his strength. He couldn't deal with the demon god yet, so he'd first use an angel to absorb its spirit and slowly digest it. The archangel, being a spirit in the lower realm, was a natural counter to his spirit binding technique. Midnight, Russian Catholic women's dormitory. A figure silently infiltrated and then silently left, but after his departure, one nun was missing from the dormitory. Finding a relatively desolate spot, George set up a barrier and, following right flame memories, began to arrange the ritual required to summon the archangel. After the ritual was completed, he placed the unconscious Sister Sasha Klojev in the center of the ritual. That should be about right. After checking and confirming that it matched right flame's memories of the ritual, George began to input magic power to activate it. As the ritual was activated, complex magical patterns appeared in the air, as if opening the gates to heaven. An extremely powerful soul force broke through dimensions and entered the ritual, gradually condensing into the form of a humanoid angel, which then possessed Sasha Chloe below. Soul binding. At that moment, George directly opened his small world, absorbing the angel into it. He then transformed into a dragon and entered the small world, beginning to unleash the soul binding technique with all his might. As expected of a soul second only to a demon god, even without its own consciousness, it was difficult to subdue. According to the procedure, the possession was incomplete, the ritual failed, and the archangel should return to heaven. Therefore, it was struggling desperately against George's forceful soul binding. Fortunately, George was not careless this time. He first absorbed the archangel into his own small world, using the laws of that world to suppress its power. He then maximized the power of the soul binding in his dragon form. Thus, after struggling for half an hour, the archangel was successfully bound by George and absorbed into his body. Having successfully bound the archangel, he returned to the real world, sent Sasha Chloe back to the girls' dormitory, and teleported back to Academy City. This trip had been extremely fruitful. Once he has absorbed the archangel's spirit, his physical strength will increase significantly. Perhaps before long, even before the small world advances to a single universe, his own strength will have already reached the single universe level. The matter is resolved. I will be going into seclusion for a while. Don't call me unless it's something particularly important. If you need my help, think about what price you can offer first. In the windowless building, after informing Aleister of the outcome from the Roman Catholic Church, George immediately returned to his room and entered seclusion. He absorbed the forcibly captured archangel, studied the 103,000 grimoires and the Roman Catholic Church's angelic and divine punishment spells, and researched saints, the Virgin Mary, and the Rite of the Holy One. He wasn't lying to Aleister. He would indeed be very busy for a while and wouldn't have time to deal with other matters. This guy, he seems even stronger after just one trip. Seeing George teleport away, Aleister couldn't help but mutter to himself. However, he didn't dwell on it much and began to adjust his subsequent plans based on George's situation. George helped him resolve the most troublesome issue, right flame, which was a huge help. Right flame's strength wasn't a major concern for him, but he couldn't act now, couldn't reveal any weaknesses. If right flame's plan succeeded, it would be a huge problem for him. Therefore, George's direct solution allowed him to avoid some risky follow-up actions and proceed cautiously. While George's clone in this world entered seclusion to digest his gains, his clone in Middle-earth also began making significant moves. Elven City, Magic Academy. George looked at the humans diligently practicing light magic below, and the leisurely elves on the other side, and said to the human chieftain, Briglis, beside him, from today onwards, the magic aptitude test is abolished. Disseminate the word that all humans, as long as they are interested in magic, can join the Magic Academy to study magic. Dean, aren't only humans with special aptitudes allowed to study magic? Briglis asked, a look of surprise on his face. Who wouldn't want to learn magical wonders, especially light magic? It's incredibly effective against the dark creatures created by Morgoth, far more so than their swords. Unfortunately, aside from the elves, who all possess exceptional magical aptitude, only a small fraction of humans are capable of learning it. The rest can only learn melee combat from the elves and blacksmithing from the dwarves. Chapter 549 The Middle-earth Magic Academy expands its enrollment. That was true before, but now, after my painstaking research, I have a method for all humans to practice magic, George explained with a smile. For a small world to become a truly complete world, it must learn to create, Not just ordinary life, but also mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas. The gods of Valinor excel at this. All of it are created in New Universe, but the details of Middle-earth were perfected bit by the gods. Therefore, if he could go to Valinor to learn from the gods, the later perfection of the small world would be much simpler. To go to Valinor openly and legitimately, and have the gods willingly guide him, he must defeat Morgoth, using Morgoth as a stepping stone. Morgoth is the most powerful Valar, and although he has used most of his power to corrupt Middle-earth, he is not so easy to deal with. However, with his current strength, he has a high chance of defeating Morgoth. The trouble lies in Morgoth's cunning. If he keeps hiding, it will be difficult for the gods to catch him. This is one of the reasons why the gods are unwilling to intervene unless pushed to a certain point. In the original story, it was humanity that stormed Valinor and exposed Morgoth's evil deeds. The gods, moved by humanity's courage, mobilized collectively. The combined power of the gods overwhelmed Morgoth, the aftershocks shattering the entire city of Beleriand before finally capturing him and banishing him to the void. Even the gods couldn't truly kill Morgoth. To achieve the same effect, he couldn't completely expose his forces, otherwise Morgoth might hide if he became alert. Therefore, he devised a two-step plan. The first step, of course, was to continue increasing his power. The stronger he was, the higher the probability of capturing Morgoth. Therefore, he had already used the spirit-binding technique to devour the previously sealed soul of Sorin. He had thought keeping Sorin's soul might be useful, and it had unexpectedly come in handy. After digesting Sorin's soul, and then the Archangel's soul, his power would likely surpass Morgoth's by a considerable margin. His avatars in other worlds were also not idle. If he could break through to the single universe level, it would be a sure thing. Even Morgoth at his peak might not be his match. Of course, breaking through to the single universe level wasn't easy. He'd probably need more time to accumulate experience. Therefore, he had prepared a second plan, to increase the power of the elves and humans, leading them to gradually remove Morgoth's minions and weaken his strength. The Dark Army created by Morgoth was also an extension of his power. Once the Dark Army was destroyed, Morgoth's own strength would decline. Then he would act swiftly, having the elves, humans, and dwarves help to surround and quickly seal Morgoth away for the Valinor trial. After observing for some time, he had gained a more concrete understanding of the elves, dwarves, and humans. In terms of magic, the elves were not a reliable option in the short term. Their magical talent was unparalleled, but their nature made it impossible for them to focus on learning magic. It would probably take several hundred years for them to become large numbers of masters of light magic. The dwarves lacked magical talent, and even if they did, they couldn't learn it. Their greatest interest lay in forging. Forcing things wouldn't work, and now, because of his intervention, the situation wasn't as dire as it was in the First Age, making it even harder for them to focus on learning magic. Therefore, he felt that dealing with the elves and dwarves should start from external sources. He would teach them his constantly improving weapon-making techniques, mass-producing various magical weapons suitable for them. For example, swords, hammers, and axes enchanted with various damaging spells, armor with superior resistance to fire, poison, and dark forces, bows with long range, the ability to curve, and the ability to track, and large magical siege weapons, etc. Elves and dwarves were skilled at crafting and learned quickly. In terms of magic, the most talented, or rather, the fastest to form an effective fighting force, were humans. Although few humans possessed magical talent, those who did and were able to learn it studied diligently, enjoyed experimenting, and could even innovate upon existing methods. While humans were inferior to elves and dwarves in many ways, they far surpassed both races in certain aspects. His only weakness, a lack of magical talent, was now resolved. Indeed, it was his research into the 24 Heavenly Valley, a legacy he'd learned from the Purple Sun Immortal. Even monkeys possessed cultivation talent. What was there to fear about not being able to enlighten humans? Moreover, the humans of the first era were purer, possessing the sincerity the Purple Sun Immortal spoke of, making them easier to enlighten. Dean, that's wonderful. I'll go inform the other tribal chiefs right away and have them send people over. Upon hearing this, Briglis ran out excitedly. Of the three races, elves, dwarves, and humans, elves held the highest position, followed by dwarves, with humans holding the lowest. Humans appeared the shortest, and their civilization was largely developed with the help of elves. Their numbers were currently the smallest of the three races, and their individual combat abilities were far inferior to elves and dwarves. If it weren't for George's appearance and their valiant fighting during Morgoth's invasion, they probably wouldn't even be comparable to elves and dwarves. They would only remain vassals, or more accurately, in the past, humans were seen by elves as pets. It's like how humans interact with monkeys in modern society. Monkeys are similar to humans, yet not quite. Teaching them human things is fun, and they'll help when injured or attacked by wild animals. But comparing monkeys to humans is impossible. Like in the movie Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Humans are slowly rising in power. If they could learn magic, they could truly stand on equal footing with elves and dwarves, securing a place in this world. George, I heard you found a way for humans to learn magic. Before Brigillus even returned, Lothain, Galadriel, and the various elven princes all sought out George to inquire about the situation. After receiving confirmation from George, their faces lit up with bright smiles. The current situation was not optimistic. Although they had withstood Morgoth's attack, barely holding their northern and western defenses, and even killing Morgoth's general Sorin, their eastern defenses were almost completely lost. Gothmog's Balrog army was still rampaging in the east, and could launch an attack at any moment. If humanity could solve the talent problem and produce more light mages, it would undoubtedly be of great benefit in future wars. If they could also produce a few more human mages like George, they could launch a direct assault on Angband. Chapter 550 Legendary Dean George. The next morning, a large number of humans gathered at the entrance of the Magic Academy. These were all people who had previously shown interest in magic but had been eliminated due to aptitude issues. They were mostly young people, because older individuals, even if they had the aptitude, lacked a learning ability to concentrate and simply couldn't focus on studying theoretical knowledge. For a burly man like Brigillus, sitting in a classroom with a book studying basic magical theory would be a nightmare. Learning magic isn't just about magical aptitude, it also requires learning ability, comprehension, memory, and so on. Young people have an advantage in these areas. In the Harry Potter world, the qualified wizards all graduated from academies, but some became powerful figures like Grindelwald who could destroy cities, while others were simply useless, unable to even defeat ordinary people. Therefore, those unsuitable for magic would be better off learning melee combat and blacksmithing skills from elves and dwarves. I'm so excited. I never thought we'd actually have a chance to become magicians. Yeah, I was so excited yesterday when the chieftain announced it I couldn't sleep all night. The dean is amazing. He actually found a way for us to become magicians, that's right. The dean is the first human magician, the founder of the Magic Academy, who once repelled an orc army to save the elven city, and even traveled thousands of miles to rescue the elven prince from a canyon. I heard the dean can also transform into a dragon. Is that true? Of course it's true. My brother tested positive for magical aptitude before, and he heard about it from his elven classmates when he was at the academy. It's said that the dean, with Princess Lothain and Princess Galadriel, was passing through. The dean is so amazing. Do you think the dean likes Princess Lothain or Princess Galadriel more? Definitely Princess Lothain. My brother said she's the most beautiful and gentle elven princess in the eyes of the elves. I think it's Princess Galadriel. Princess Galadriel single-handedly killed a Balrog on the eastern frontier last time. Princess Lothain is Princess Galadriel's cousin. Before George and his entourage arrived, the young humans below were far from idle, chatting animatedly, their conversation revolving almost entirely around George. In their eyes, George was a living legend, having accomplished countless feats that even the elves found unbelievable. Not only humans, but many elves and dwarves also deeply admired George. Many elves had been saved by him, while the dwarves revered his unparalleled weapon forging skills, always managing to create astonishing equipment. Just then, the gates of the Magic Academy slowly opened, and a beautiful elf, like a fairy, emerged from the academy. She smiled gently. I am Lucian, the vice principal of the Magic Academy. Boys and girls, please line up in 2 rows and follow me into the school. Oh, as you see fit, she is Princess Lucian. She's so beautiful. The young men and women, staring at the elven princess standing before them, a beauty that seemed to eclipse the world, felt their minds go blank. It took them a while to react, and they quickly lined up and followed Lucian into the academy. Alright, you win. I also think Princess Lothain and the dean are the best match now. Lothain wasn't surprised by the reaction of the young men and women behind her. She was already used to it. Not just humans, Many elves reacted the same way, taking a long time to adjust to her presence. It was because of her beauty that she had been kidnapped by the older elf princes who had just arrived in Middle-earth, foreigner's sons. Wow, so amazing! Entering the Magic Academy, the young men and women couldn't help but marvel again at the various sculptures that seemed to move and talk, cleaning, trimming lawns and trees, and the beautiful environment. They had already been awestruck by the beauty of the elven city when they arrived, but after entering the academy, they realized it paled in comparison. Following Lothine through the academy's plaza into the castle, past a magnificent hall, and arriving at the grand hall, they exclaimed again. So big, it was indeed big. From the outside, the hall looked to be only 300 or 400 square meters, but inside it felt like entering a new world. Looking up at the sky, they even saw a huge sun. George had used the unseen stretch charm on the entire Great Hall, and like Newt's suitcase, he had made some arrangements. The large sun was actually a fake sun created with the illumination charm. However, while the Great Hall appeared to be a small world, it was actually quite different from his own. Expanding the space with the unseen stretch charm only increased the area. The laws inside the Great Hall were the same as those outside, and it didn't enhance his strength. In contrast, in his own created world, the laws were created by himself. Here, he was the master of the world, able to suppress the strength of his enemies, while his own strength would be greatly enhanced. Inside the Great Hall were 3 very long tables, occupied by elves, dwarves, and human students. Elves were the most numerous, followed by dwarves, and then the fewest humans. At the end of the long tables was a floating platform, with a headmaster, George, seated in the center, flanked by elven princes and princesses, and behind them were the academy's teachers. Climb the ladders. Lucia pointed to 2 ladders at the entrance of the Great Hall, directing the 2 groups to stand on them separately, then channeling magic to activate them. The 2 ladders immediately floated up. Stand still, she gave a gentle reminder, then unfurled a pair of white wings, carrying 2 cloud ladders to the platform. As expected of a half-human, half-god elf, her magical talent is truly remarkable. George watched as Lucian brought the new students to the platform, smiling and nodding at her. Let's begin. He had learned a great deal of elven magic from Lucian, and naturally, he had also taught her many of his own spells, such as flight spells, apparition, light magic, and various elemental spells. His main purpose was to have Lucian attend classes in his place, giving him more time for other things. Lucian wasn't particularly interested in learning magic, but her talent was so high that she learned almost anything, eventually becoming the vice dean of the Magic Academy, often teaching in George's place. When I call your names, come forward and sit in the chairs. Just close your eyes. Lucian produced the student roster. Hannah, a blonde girl, nervously climbed the cloud ladder to the platform and sat down. At that moment, George flipped his hand, and a hat appeared in his grasp. Go! The hat flew off and landed on the girl's head. The girl immediately felt all sorts of strange patterns being injected into her mind, and a warm current began to flow through her body. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.